Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Do you ever see Gigi in the neighborhood?
Joe Menendez.
Gigi or Henry?
So I'm gonna keep it Joe Menendez.
No.
No. I only
Well, this is gonna cost me money. Frank Arroyo running for commissioner.
You got my message about the prince.
I do. I printed 2 sets. They're in my office, but I came from. I got 2 sets, full-size sets.
Gracias. let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence your phones and beepers if you have any. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request to be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the city commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to resolution number 2021-118, the city of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom, actually, we do not need swearing in because this is legislative. Lobbyist registration.
Recording in
This goes to each
progress.
person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of March 12th, 2025 to order. The time is 6:02. If you please call the roll.
Robert Behar,
Here.
Julio Galabia,
Here.
Sue Kovalansky,
Here.
Felix Pardo,
Here.
Javier Sama, Chip Weiser, maybe Eisenstadt.
Here. We don't have any swearing in tonight, and we also don't have the ex parte communications tonight.
Go drink some water. I'll be right back.
Zoom platform participants, I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open your chat and send a direct message to Grace Chen stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Grace will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. First, we have the approval of the minutes of February 12, 2025. Did everybody get a chance to take a look at those? Anybody like to make a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second. We have a motion. We have a second by Julio. Call the roll, please.
Julio Galabia,
Yes.
Sue Kovalansky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo.
He's coming right now. Let's just wait 1 second.
Sure.
We're approving the minutes, if you're okay. Yes. Felix Pardo said yes.
Javier Sama's not here yet. Chip Weiser, ABS,
I'll abstain.
Robert Behar,
I'm sorry?
Robert Behar.
Yes.
Thank you. Procedure that we'll use for tonight. First, we'll have the identification of the agenda item by Mr. Caller. Then we'll go ahead and have the presentation by the applicant or the agent. In this case, a lot of it will be the presentation by staff. Then we'll go ahead and open it for public comment, first in chamber, Zoom platform, and then the phone line. We'll go ahead and close it for public comment, any board discussion, motion, further discussion if needed, and a second of motion. Then we'll have the board's final comments and a vote. Mr. Caller, if you please read the first item into the agenda.
Item E1, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 2, Zoning District, Section 2-101, Single Family Residential District, and Section 2-102, Multifamily 1 Duplex District, and Article 16, Definitions, to provide exceptions to the separation of accessory structures from the main structure under certain requirements, and provide for open-air accessory structures with ground area coverage requirements, providing for repeal of provision, severability clause, codification, and providing an effective date. Item E1, public hearing.
Good evening, Jennifer Garcia, Planning and Zoning Director. If I could have the PowerPoint, please. Should be just a few slides. Thank you. So-
Before we proceed, let's take note that Javier Salman has joined us.
Mr.
And
Chair,
is
you mean
present.
you mean the late Javier Salman?
No, the current.
Not the late.
Not the late.
No,
Party, possibly.
that was bad.
So no worries, you haven't missed anything yet. So as you know, our single-family and duplex zoning has building lot coverage maximums. 35% for the principal building, and then extra 10% for accessory structures. And right now, our zoning code is not very clear as far as what separation you would have for an accessory structure. So right now, there's two issues happening. The first issue is that properties that have detached garages from their principal building is not easily accessible from their house or vice versa. So whenever they come forward and ask zoning, can I have a breezeway to access my garage so I don't get wet when it's raining? Zoning says, sure, but the whole thing would have to count against your 35%. Once it touches each other and is attached, it becomes part of the 35%. The other issue is it's not very clear as far as what separation means. So sometimes it's structurally separated, it's counting as the 35 and an additional 10%, which of course leaves kind of unusable areas and doesn't really make much sense to have a 1-inch separation, for example. And so what we're getting in return are not the best building typologies in our neighborhoods. Also in duplexes, you're getting kind of boxy, not very innovative, creative building types. So what we're proposing today, sponsored by a member of the commission, is to look at the current code as far as building lot coverage and how we can encourage open air spaces. So this has two parts to it. The first part is that anything that's attached to the main structure that's open air would count as part of the 45% and not penalize the 35%, if that makes any sense. And in addition to that, there's a 5-foot separation, so you can have an actual separation, a walkway between an attached structure of an accessory structure and the main structure. So this, of course, is most usable for these smaller properties with the setback requirements, open space requirements. Those are not touching. I should also specify the 45%, 35 plus the 10% is not changing in this. This is allowing some flexibility as far as having a more creative, usable property. So you can see in the larger example here, if you have enough space, you can actually create a nice courtyard, whereas today you probably can't just because you can't attach them. Once you attach them today, it has to count against the 35%. It's a little more limiting. So this is a way to encourage more outdoor space in our single-family and duplex properties. And here are some images of the idea behind this, of what we could try and encourage single-family and duplexes to do, to have courtyards, to have those open spaces, those loggias, to be able to make more usability of the people's properties. So you can see some of the courtyard. Again, some of this is taken from Ali's Beach, which is in the Panhandle. All of our open space requirements would still be required. This is not going beyond the 45% maximum ground coverage that we have today. And so I have our esteemed city architect here, Juan Riesco. He discussed this with the Board of Architects. In general, it was very well received. They're very excited about the flexibility to be able to do better site planning for our properties. So if you have any questions as it relates to architecture, he's here to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan, would you like to come up and give a little bit of an overview in your discussion with the Board of Architects?
Absolutely. Juan Riesco, city architect. Any questions specifically for me, or would you like me to just?
My question, and just to be clear, we're not changing the overall 35 plus 10 lot coverage allowed. We're still keeping that.
The
only
maximum
thing-
lot coverage is going to stay at 45%. The only thing we're doing is giving the applicant the ability to connect.
With a roof from.
Roof structure,
from the
open air, in
accessory.
South Florida, outdoor living is a must. And a lot of projects are coming to us asking for this, and we can't grant it because right now the code actually penalizes you when you attach it, because then it reverts back to the 35%. And so people start making the houses smaller and people complain, the residents don't want that. So we thought this made a lot of sense from the architectural perspective, because again, we're not increasing lot coverage. The maximum is always going to be 45%. We're just allowing the applicants or the architects to do a nicer scenario in the backyards with regard to open-air structures, loggias, pergolas, trellises. What's happening is everybody's detaching, everybody wants 35% and they also want the 10%. So they design the main house and they design these ancillary structures that are detached that don't make any sense. A lot of times we're having issues with aesthetics because since the element is not connected to the house physically, they change the design on the accessory use. And then we get into a combative discussion about aesthetics and architectural style. And I want a modern thing in the backyard. It's a folly. It's not connected. And so it creates a lot of controversy on our side at the board level. And we felt, based on projects that we've seen that have been really successful with this concept, that it's appropriate. And I think it's something that's not derogatory for the city. I think we're not changing the intent of the code, which is the maximum lot coverage stays at 45%. We're just giving them another avenue to make a better backyard.
And you're right, at the end, it's gonna look much better because it's gonna be more cohesive. So-
Absolutely. And that's what we want. That's the intent. And again, we're running into roadblocks because once people detach the structure, they feel compelled sometimes to do something different aesthetically, and that creates conflict and discussion and conflict between the board and the applicants. And so we're trying to see what the answer is here, and we feel that this is the logical answer. It's just how we calculate the square footage, how we look at it, but in general, the big picture doesn't change.
It just
45%
cannot be
is
enclosed from the main structure to accessory, cannot be enclosed.
correct. Only covered. Yeah, it can't be air
Covered.
conditioned.
Right.
But again, in South Florida, people love trellises, gazebos,
Absolutely.
pergolas, covered areas where they can barbecue and not be exposed to rain, not be exposed to the hot sun, but it creates a really attractive space. I mean, you saw the photographs that Jennifer presented. Outdoor space in South Florida is a must. I mean, I think everybody wants it. And I think we should have that provision to allow the applicants to do it because it provides for, in our opinion, better aesthetics.
Does the roof line have to be continuous?
Not necessarily, as long as they integrate roof materials, they can step it up, down, we leave that up to the designer or the architect.
Okay.
There's no mass increase. There's no, it allows for more flexibility and creativity, in our opinion. It incentivizes, again, these pergolas, these louvers, these covered spaces, gazebos. And at the end, it's up to the discretion of the board in terms of design and mass anyway. So I don't see a problem moving forward because they have the ability to critique the connection, the look, the aesthetics, the materiality, the height. So they still, at the end of the day, can have input into that with regards to mass. So we think, again, it's a positive feature. We think it's a good thing moving forward. The board is fully behind this. Jennifer presented to my board, I don't know, several weeks ago, a month ago, and everybody was very receptive to it. We've actually had several architects that have discussed this openly with us and with the board, and we've had to not be able to agree to it because it wasn't feasible, because it was actually impacting the square footage of the main house because it was considered 35%. Once you connect it, you get zapped. That 10%, you lose that 10%. So people were not going for that, and again, they're providing the main structure, the pool deck, and then a little accessory cabana building, a bathroom, 100 feet away. That makes no logical sense from our perspective, again, architecturally, and what we want more than anything is to have the projects to be connected and cohesive and complementary to each other, not two distinct forms. And unfortunately, we've been getting that, especially in the larger lots down south, in the estate lots, where they end up with a lot of accessory structures dotting the backyard, and sometimes it becomes a hodgepodge. If it's done properly, it can be designed in a fragmented sense, but unfortunately, a lot of architects don't have that capability, and we don't end up getting something positive. We get something that's kind of, in some ways, derogatory to the overall scheme.
Can you think of any worst-case scenario here?
No, again, I don't see the downside. We've debated this internally, we've reviewed it internally, we've looked at several projects live in the board meetings where architects and owners have wanted this, and we've had our debates, and unfortunately, some of them, wouldn't go forward because we advised them that this was gonna happen. The way the code is written right now, it penalizes you the 10% when you connect. And everybody wants a connection. Who in South Florida doesn't want a roof to get away from the sun?
My question is that you have a minimum separation of 5 feet, correct? No?
That's a discussion for when you have a detached structure only. The 5 foot, because another thing we were combating and fighting with people on, the concept of detached structure is an inch in a lot of people's mind. And theoretically and realistically, it is. An inch is a separation. And based on the definition of a detached structure, they were achieving that. But again, think about it constructability-wise. You can't build a structure an inch away. You can't put a fascia an inch away from another fascia because you can't paint it, you can't nail it, you can't maintain it, you can't put a gutter there. So it just created a lot of problems for us at our point where we review these things on a weekly basis. So again, we spoke with planning director, we came up, we discussed 3 feet, we ended up with 5 feet, I think is what we agreed to. That we felt that when you want a detached structure, an ancillary structure, the minimum has to be 5 feet. We don't want something 2 inches away from the main house when it's not connected, because to us, that's arbitrary and didn't make any sense. Either you connect it, tie it in, or you don't. But they were smart. They figured, hey, as long as I show you a 1 inch separation, I get my 10%. So the argument went round and round and round until we got to the point where, hey, we have to do something because it just creates, again, more conflict for us at the board level, and we don't have the power to enforce it because the code is not reinforcing the concept of what we really want. So I think it's a great idea.
5 feet is very narrow.
I'm sorry?
I think even 5 feet is very narrow.
For a detached structure, we think it's a minimum, Javier. I mean, I think that, I agree, I mean, maybe more, but we felt, again, in the code, we deal with minimums. That's what the codes typically establish. And then we hope that architects take it to another level and don't do the minimums. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that it's a prescriptive thing and they follow as long as they meet the code, hey, you can't touch me. And that's true to a certain extent.
You're right, maybe 10 feet or something would be more.
I think that would be much more
But-
amenable,
but-
especially if you're dealing with these overall larger lots in the south part of the city.
A great
And even in the
example
northern
of the
part of the
issues.
city. I mean, we have a wealth of single-family and duplex lots along Lejeune.
Right.
Would benefit from that, and they already have a credit of not having any parking. So that would give them the ability to then have an auxiliary
Yeah, on the
structure.
duplexes, it becomes critical in the garages,
They don't have garages. You're not required to have a garage for a duplex.
What I'd like to
No, I don't know
do
about
is,
that.
before we continue, do we have,
They're
we don't have
required. Yeah,
anybody,
they're required.
before we continue,
Both
we don't
units?
have anybody here in chambers. Do we have anybody on Zoom for the public?
No,
Anybody on phone platform?
no.
Okay, so let me go ahead and close it for the public. What I'd like to do is go in order, if that's possible, so it's hard for the court reporter to go ahead and take notes if everybody's talking together. Chip? would
I
you
just had a
start, please?
question, and I think Jennifer,
Can you hear me?
Now,
Thank you.
I thought I heard Jennifer in her presentation saying that if someone had a home at 35% and a detached structure at 10%, and they wanted to put a porte cochere or open garage on the side, they couldn't do it, but now they can do it? Did I misunderstand that?
So you can do it today, but once you attach it, it becomes part of that 35%. So you're encouraged.
So they can't do it. If I don't have if I have a cottage in the back and it's 10%, and I have a home and it's at 35%, and I wanted to put a covered porte cochere on the side, I
Well, then
cannot
you're
do
already
that.
maxed out. You're already maxed out because you already have 10%, 35%.
I've already maxed out, okay.
Right, exactly.
So this doesn't help.
Right.
Because listen, no one uses those rear garages to put cars in. They've either There we go, we're back.
We're back on.
So if I already have 10% and I already have 35%, how can,
Can I?
yeah,
respond?
yeah, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so again, thinking of that same concept of the detached garage in the rear of the property or on the side of the property, this concept allows you to attach it and still comply with the 45% versus the code the way it is today. If the applicant attaches the rear garage to the house, he gets reverted back to the 35%. So nobody attaches, like you say, rear garages, everything is detached. Nobody likes that because on a rainy day or a sunny day, or you got groceries or whatever, you park in your detached garage in the rear and you want to come to your main structure, you got to go
Yeah, no,
in open air.
What I think he's asking, if you already have a detached structure, 10%, and a house is 35%, you're just gonna be allowed to do a connection, a cover connection. You cannot do an additional structure. No. You're done, you exceeded.
like a garage on the side to park your
If
car.
you already exceeded if you're using the 10% and the 35%, no more.
You're done.
That's it, you're done.
Yeah.
Or I could tear the cottage down and,
Yes.
Yeah, you can,
This is only allowing you to do the connection, a cover connection from,
yeah,
from accessory to main.
without
That's
counting
all
the
we're asking
covered
for.
condition as part of the, I get, it, okay. I misunderstood Jennifer.
Is there a limit to the size of the connection?
Not now. I think that's up to the board's discretion and the design and the overall site plan and, you know, where the pool is and, you know, all those things are looked at and vetted by the board. If they feel that the connection is too wide, I'm sure they'll make a comment. Hey, bring it back narrower, tone it down, lower it. You know, if we feel it's impinging on the neighbor, on the neighborhood, we'll discuss it at that point.
Chip, are you done?
I'm done.
With your comments?
Thank you.
Mr. Pardo? Thank you for patiently waiting.
So, I've been walking around a little bit around the city.
If you would speak up into the microphone, please. Thank you.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. I've been walking around the city recently and different parts of the city. I've got to tell you, I'm very, very, very disappointed on many of the projects that I've seen, residences, that I've seen that the bulk, the mass is so enormous. And in fact, many of the residents have told me that they are kind of taken aback by these, what they called, not me, shoebox designs. Just this enormous mass. It's not, you know, modern or whatever, just absolutely no push and pull, no interest in it. I've seen it myself. Maybe you guys have a different opinion, but it's really altering in a very negative way the city. I think the residential areas. In the graphics that staff came up with, they show this U shape, very usable, very friendly, you know, very somewhere else kind of thing, or here. But one of the things about that particular proposed open air accessory structure is that although you have a swimming pool inside of this U shape, let's say, and it looks fantastic and all this stuff, the mass gets pushed to the outside toward the front. When you have an accessory building that has that additional 10%, you have a natural push and pull and you have a separation where you have green space most of the time and usable areas. I remember that I designed for my brother-in-law an outside gazebo, which was absolutely spectacular, and I turned it at an angle and it had this swimming pool and it looked fantastic, like a garden, much better than this. And from a massing standpoint on the outside, it paid homage to the rest of the buildings and houses that were in that neighborhood. This doesn't do that. What this is simply adding more mass to the thing. I personally think it's a really bad idea. And the reason I think it's a bad idea is because many of the lots are 50 by 100 in the north part of the Gables. This is putting 2 pounds in a 1 pound bag. Visually, it looks like 2 pounds in a 1 pound bag. I remember that this has been, and people, when they bought their properties, the zoning code said, this is it. Now, for certain people to say, I want more, they could ask for anything else. But the thing is, now we're getting into a point where someone can obtain a variance because it's a self-imposed type of thing, and they can't go to the Board of Adjustment and get that. So therefore, now they just want to change the code. This changing of the code changes the massing, the breaks between these. Now, let me give you another example. For example, when you take a city block in some of the areas here in the city, and let's say that a certain block is peppered with these little two-story apartment buildings, they have setbacks in between them, and they have trees that grow in between them. Some developers now can take all of those little apartments, tear them down, and now build one large thing under a pad, planned area development. You lose something. It doesn't matter how nice you do the architecture. You lose something, which means green space, the heat index that we get from a heat island effect, which is very real. And we're just not thinking that way. So the problem I have with this is that this was not haphazardly put in there of the 35 and the 10%. It was put in there by really smart people a long time ago to make sure that we kept it that way. Those limitations are there for a reason. One of the problems that you have with the larger estate areas are, these are areas that were annexed afterwards. They were working under the Miami-Dade zoning code. That's not a fair comparison. I think that one of the things that we have to do is be very, very careful on how we change the future of just our residential areas. Putting 2 pounds in a 1 pound bag is never a good idea. And I think visually, this is one of the problems that I have with this. The charm that you have, even if it's a larger lot, when you have that push and pull, and even a separate building, which used to be a garage, and then it became an in-laws quarter, which is allowed by code. What is not allowed by code is to rent it out to somebody else that's not part of your family. That's what's not allowed. I just find it distressing, walking through these areas, that some of the architecture, the mass is so enormous, the height is so enormous, that it just is transforming those neighborhoods into something else. I don't think it's part of Coral Gables, and I disagree with you 100%.
Thank you. Sue?
Oh, sorry, Chair, I just wanted to clarify things. This is not going to decrease any requirement for 40% open space requirement that they have in the code. This is only just being able to attach accessory and main structure.
I'm sorry, Jennifer, I understood that perfectly. The thing that I'm talking about is separating masses. When you separate a mass, it usually looks smaller or more compatible or more human in scale. When you add and attach the mass, it doesn't. I don't care how many arches you put in it, it's different.
Right.
You could take a house on a very long lot and make it look completely different. In this particular case, what you do with separate buildings, I mean, this has been going on for a long, long time. Frank Lloyd Wright did it very successfully, and he always separated things with other buildings, other structures. We have examples over and over, very successfully done. He also was very careful with the height issue to maintain that the massing didn't look as bad as possible. In this particular case now, we're adding more massing and we're adding more height, and it almost looks like your 25-foot setback in the front is less when you put these bulky buildings in front of it. And it doesn't matter how much decoration you put on it. It's like putting lipstick on a pig sometimes.
Right, so in the way that this is written today is not proposed as a by right thing you can do. The hands are in the Board of Architects. They can approve or not approve something based on the massing. So we did take that into account with the language proposed.
Thank you. Sue?
I have an issue with size. You know, to Julio's point, like how big can these things be? Because I can imagine a house and then a pool and then the structure on the opposite side of the pool. And somebody says, I want to connect to that thing on the other side of the pool. And all of a sudden, you have this roof structure where from above, you've got no backyard anymore. It's a giant roof, which becomes a livable space. You can live in an open air environment like that. You put a kitchen in there, all of a sudden you're expanding your living space. And I know you said, well, the Board of Architects won't allow that to happen. Well, we've heard that before too, okay? And then we end up with these kinds of structures that we're seeing all over. So without limitations that it has to directly attach to, there can't be any interference in between. I mean, there are all kinds of options, I think, that if we were going to pass this, need to be in there to protect it and not just leaving it to the Board of Architects, who with a very, savvy person in front of them can convince them that that roof over it is perfectly fine. So you take a drone above it and all of a sudden it's nothing but a gigantic roof. So I've got a real problem with this.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
Julio?
Well, same point. I'm concerned with not having a limit to the size of the connector. I mean, we all see it as architects as the main residence, the adjacent residence, and a hallway covered walk, whatever. But again, if it can be made as wide as the main residence, then you end up with too much square footage.
Yeah, so the limitation would be the height. It can't go beyond the 25 feet maximum height. The limitation would be the actual ground coverage, right? So they can't have too much of that. It can be enclosed today. What you're saying, like if they have an open air structure that's as wide as the building, they could do that today. They probably wouldn't because it's not, usable space, enclosed, a bedroom, kitchen, whatever. It's open air. This is not going beyond that 45% lot coverage. So that would be the limitation that they would have for the size of any attached open air structure would be how much they can be able to cover for their property. And of course, balancing that with the 40% open air landscape area.
So the connector is limited to the same lot coverage.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yes.
I'm fine then.
that's still there.
I'm fine.
That has not changed, and I thought
thought
I
it was
explained it.
in addition to.
Yeah, you still have that control. We haven't increased any of that. It's still the same parameters, with the exception of we're allowing some flexibility in the connectors. And again, the amount of flexibility is dictated by the discussion that occurs at the board level during the design review. And if the board feels or is compelled to say, hey, this is too big, too wide, too imposing, too massive, too large, I'm sure that comment will come up. It comes up now, as Jennifer stated. You have the ability to take the back of your house and put a covered terrace from one end to the other. That's something that's allowed by code, by right, by now. If you want to use that in part of your 35%, you can do that. But most people are savvy, and they want air-conditioned space, and so they want to try to make the air-conditioned space more usable than the covered terrace, so that gets reduced to a certain extent, but it's still part of the program. Nothing has changed with that regard. I don't think, honestly, that adding the allowance of a connector piece at the rear of the property that connects an accessory structure to the rear of the property is going to impact the mass of the front of the house. I think that's already said and done during the design of the house, and that should be addressed by the board in terms of what you stated, Mr. Pardo, the height, the mass, and the board, again, looks at that, vets that, discusses that, and, at the end, we hope that we have a design that's contextual, that's within scale, but we also understand that applicants want higher ceilings. Nobody wants a house with an 8-foot beam anymore. That's a dinosaur in today's world, based on my experience of attending these meetings on a weekly basis. So a 10-foot tie beam is a no-no in today's world. If you're in real estate and you're developing your property or your home for your family, your kids, you want a higher ceiling. So we do look at that. We do allow 9-foot beams, 10-foot beams. Sometimes in some of these designs, one of the popular themes nowadays is to have the great room. The great room has been introduced back into the equation that started many years ago, and now as people want the large living area area kitchen as one large open space. That creates massing problems for us. We deal with this all the time. And we discuss that with the applicants. Hey, you know, it's creating a room that's probably like the size of this room, 30, 40 feet long, that has a living space, a dining space, and a kitchen space, all under one volume, under one ceiling. You can't have a 9-foot ceiling for a space this long. The proportionality of the space is awkward, so you do have to go up. Now, again, I understand the massing discussion, and I think the board understands the massing discussion, and we try to refine the design as much as possible to address that, but we also want the applicants and the residents and the homeowners to get the product that they expect and want. And I think that's a viable discussion that we wrestle with every week. And how do we address that? You know, it's part of the BOA meetings on Thursdays, and sometimes we win, sometimes they win. And that's part of the negotiation, and that's part of our job here at the city, is to try to get something that's compatible with the neighborhood in terms of mass, but also is productive for the homeowner, that they can enjoy their space and their home. And, you know, that would be my response to the issue of your statement about this particular discussion today in connecting an accessory structure to the main house is going to trigger a larger mass in the front of the house. I'm not sure. I can understand your position. I get it, but I don't know if that's a direct result of this discussion and this allowance of connecting the structures. Yes, it's going to create more roof area in the backyard. Yes, it's going to create maybe a little bit less green area. But I think that the positive side is it creates a more unified property for the homeowner.
Juan, do you remember about 20 years ago when Don Sleznick, was championing against McMansions? You remember that?
I remember discussions about that. Yeah, absolutely.
So the McMansions are alive and well now, because I see them all over the place in the city of Coral Gables, and specifically in lots that are no more than 100 by 100. And it's just gotten to the point where people were very upset about these McMansions. They're very upset about the type of architecture and massing that's going up right now. And people expect or deserve this? No, I think they expect and deserve to play under the rules when they bought. Changing the rules during the game isn't the right thing to do. Me, it's 4 balls you walk and 3 strikes you're out. That's the rule.
Felix, what I'd like to do is I'd like to continue in the process, and then we'll have a final discussion with it. If not, it takes away time from other members.
It's that, I'm sorry, he was addressing me, and therefore I...
Yeah, my response was at his comment.
No, I understand. Julio, are you?
I'm done.
I'm done. Thank you, Javier.
Is there an attachment to this item with regards to the specific wording that you're going to be using?
Yeah, so it's in the staff report on page 3 and page 4 of your staff report.
Okay.
So it's under a single family.
I have a copy of it because I can't find it on the,
It's,
Yeah, I
and
think
get the,
Soleil has one.
you have another one? Okay, fine. I'll hold my comments until I get a chance to read this properly.
Robert?
Yeah, I see this, and I respectfully disagree with the comments my fellow board member and architect. And by the way, I did study Frank Lloyd Wright pretty good, and a lot of this it goes back to the more anything else, the prairie houses where he did have connectors, open connector cover areas. I don't see this as a mansion or anything. I see this as a way to go from an existing structure or a structure that is the accessory to the main house. Sue has a valid point. Maybe we do have some limitation on the width of these elements that do the connection. I don't think that the width of the house, of the main house, is appropriate. So maybe a limitation on how wide could this be is the correct condition for something like this. I don't see it as adding anything more than a convenience to go from a detached, whatever, garage or whatever, to the main house. I see this as and I don't see this, any way, shape, or form, comparing it to some of the houses that, Felix has brought up. I think this is good. I think that it's probably time where this should have been done a long time ago. It's time that we do it today. My only, and I don't know, at the end, I'm all, the width that we should limit these connectors, for lack of a better word, to have. I would not want to see them the width of the principal structure.
Yeah, of course not.
Okay?
Anybody would.
But right now, I don't know if there's a limitation. Yes, it's up to the board, but I think there we need to be a little bit more prescriptive if we have to.
So typically porches or, or loggias are typically 8 or 10 feet deep.
Look,
You know.
I'm thinking, and I'm thinking maybe you cap it at 12 to 15 feet in width, because as an accessory structure, a garage, let's say, what used to be a garage, it used to be like 20 feet minimum, I think, or 22 feet. I don't want it the whole width. Maybe we limit to, 60% of that, and that's where I came with a number, just as a connector, so it doesn't look like a massive connector.
Right, we concur with that, we agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't think that's something that's been overlooked. But again, we don't want a prescriptive code. We don't want to tell people what to do. We'd like to, I think, let the architects present their cases, and then we review it. And then we say, hey, this is a great idea, it's beautiful, or this is terrible, it's too massive. You need to tone it down, you need to scale it down. So I don't think that's.
I think in a matter of helping you, if you went and added the purpose for the structure, it would go a long way to helping the board basically decide whether it's an appropriate connection. We can get into the nitty-gritty of the width and whatnot, but if you say its primary purpose is for a pedestrian connection between an auxiliary structure and the main structure, and limited to 1-story height, I don't know why you want 2 stories. But that would go a long way to controlling its size and give you the power to be able to, or give the board the power to be able to reject things which are obviously not designed for a primary purpose of a walkway connection.
Right. I think there's 2 things at play here. One item or one issue in the discussion is what you just said, a pedestrian connector, a way for me to walk from A to B and be covered and protected. The other option is using that covered space as a usable space, as a barbecue area, as a gazebo, a place where you can lay out, like in the photographs that she showed. These are living spaces that you can use outdoors that can be used for recreation as part of the pool that's covered, that's protected. So if you limit the width of the connector to 5 feet, then you can't use it. It's purely a connector.
You're absolutely correct.
And is that what we want? Do we want little hallways in the backyard that are 4 or 5 feet wide? No, I think the concept here is to promote livability and enjoyment of the backyard, and to give people the ability to use the space for an activity, a function, a sit-down, a lounge chair. I want to have my drink next to the pool. I can't put my lounge chair.
Now I'm totally confused, because I thought this was about just connecting structures.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it up. Because
That's the way it was presented, Juan.
I-
That's the
I'm-
way
I'm-
it came across.
I'm taking it to the level where I think we need to discuss, because that's the reason we're here.
Right, so those diagrams, remember, we're trying to, the concern we get from residents is they can't get to their garage. That's the concern we hear about. We also hear the concern that people can't have courtyards. That's why I had those images of U-shaped buildings that had courtyards and had loggias and porches facing these courtyard areas.
You might want to put the images again.
Yeah.
It might be helpful to look at the sketches.
Sure, if I could have that PowerPoint.
No, I mean, we saw we know what you're talking about, but I mean, this is presented as, let me get to my garage without getting wet. And that I get, that's what I thought we were talking about. Now we're talking about, let's put lounge chairs out there and a barbecue grill and, have it all covered, and then you look from above, and it's all a roof.
Okay, so then if that's, we want to limit it to a walkway, that's why I'm, there, look at, here's the,
Right, so these are the courtyard
The view
images,
of the
mostly
spaces
in
that we
Ali's
think
Beach that
are-
have, right, that have loggias and open rooms facing these courtyard areas.
Yeah, well, it
basically.
should be presented,
Or
if
back
it's a
area.
loggia, it's a loggia. If it's a walkway, a connector, that's what it, but now you're expanding the whole thing to,
Yeah,
let's
so
fill the whole backyard with a
On
roof.
page 4 of your staff report, under accessory use, building or structure, the underlying portion is the proposed language, and it goes into attached open-air accessory structures in single-family residential and multifamily 1 districts may include 1 or 2-story breezeways, loggias, porches, and other open-air structures. The loggias are not usually something you walk through. A breezeway is, porches are not, so it's a variety of different open-air areas.
Look, I do think, and when I see some example, the width is important too. I don't have a problem with the exhibit all the way on the right, which is a 2-story. If it's appropriate, I don't have a problem with that. But I do have some concern of how wide. I see the middle bottom, image, and that is more than a, let's say, connector. I do, maybe it's not 15, maybe it's a little bit more, but it's not, it gotta be some type of balance, in my opinion.
Yeah, it can't be the width of the buildings that it's connecting, one way or the other, and it should be limited to some proportion of it, whether it's half or 2/3, and even that the cover be limited.
Yeah, there's still a limitation of 10%. That's a
Well,
limitation.
that-
Limitation
but-
is the open air requirements, the ground coverage requirement, the 10% accessory open air structures.
That's
There's
all they get.
limitations, yeah.
They only
Oh,
get
because
10%.
that's gonna be, but then I'm getting confused here.
Identify yourself for the
Because
record.
you allow a 10% accessory and you have your main structure. This is just to be able to connect from one to the other and does not count towards the accessory square footage.
It
or the-
counts against your 45%, yes,
Oh, it
that's the
counts
limitation.
towards-
Yes.
Oh.
We're not
okay,
increasing
So if you
now.
already have both,
45%
you
at
can't
all.
have this.
Yes.
Oh,
You
okay.
gotta work with a 45.
We can't,
Guys, everybody can't talk at the same time.
Sorry.
for people that haven't spoken on the record, they should identify themselves. I am so-and-so from the department, something. So,
Sorry, for the record, Arceli Ridila, zoning administrator. So really, nothing changed here. The only change here is that now those accessory structure that is 10%, limited to 10%, can now be attached, but it still be limited
That's
to
all.
10%.
Oh, this
That's
is,
it.
this is simple.
That's
Javier,
Okay, what if somebody has a 35% primary and a 10% accessory?
They're
Then
done.
they can't have anything.
they're done,
They
yeah.
can't have anything
That
more.
was Chip Withers' comment, and that was correct. You are maxed out at 45%. 35 plus 10 is 45%. So if you have that condition right now that Mr. Withers brought up, you can't attach. Sorry.
I thought I explained that, but I guess I didn't properly, but that's what we're doing. We're not increasing the 45%, we're not increasing mass. We're working within the constraints that we have. We're just allowing the connector piece so it doesn't penalize you back into the 35%. That's all. It's still the same at the end of the day.
all right, Javier, are you done?
I have no further questions for this witness.
A couple of questions I'd like to ask. How do you handle an open kitchen today? So,
How do you what?
how do you handle an open kitchen? Let's say I want to do an open kitchen in my yard.
An outdoor kitchen is
Outdoor
the term that we have in our business right now. And the answer is very carefully. We review the project, we look at the location, the position, where it sits, is it concealed from the neighbor? Is there an issue with the barbecue and the smoke? And, I mean, we look at all those things and we determine, hey, it's acceptable or it's not.
And if it's attached to the main structure, it counts against your 35%. If it's detached, it's counting against your extra 10%, if that's what your question is. How is it calculated? It's calculated today, it's calculated in the future if this gets approved.
What I'd like to do is recognize and welcome Commissioner Fernandez for coming in. Thank you, welcome. Let's continue. Okay,
Yeah, when it comes to the calculations, I leave that up to zoning.
okay.
We only look at the aesthetic aspect of this thing, and again, if it's a positive looking concept, then we go with it.
What happens, in Florida, we have a lot of wind-driven rain. So if you go ahead and you want to do, so there's a point to connect from point A to point B, how do you handle the part where if it's too high, you've got rain coming in there? It defeats the whole purpose of what you're trying to do.
That's a very good point that again, we discuss all the time. Some people want to have a 10-foot, 12-foot tie beam, and it's only a 5-foot wide walkway. And I said, guys, in the driving rain, you're going to get soaked here. You're not protected, you're not exposed, you're fully exposed because the
Right.
driving rain comes in at 45 degrees. We're not doing a whole lot here. So again, those are things that we talk about. Those are things that we look at in terms of also the width of the overhang. You know, sometimes increases the roof mass too much, so we work on that. Hey, tone down the overhang, bring it back in a little bit, lower the beam to make it more in sync with the scale of the home. You know, a lot of these things happen with existing properties, not new construction. And so we have to deal with existing 8-foot beam heights. We have to deal with existing 6-inch overhangs of these older homes that have the concave, you know, stucco overhangs. And so, you know, a lot of architects come in with crazy ideas and dreams, and somehow it gets whittled down to something that we feel is productive and acceptable from a design standard.
I mean, Sue makes a very valid point as far as you take this area, you make it 10-foot wide or 12-foot wide, and then you start sticking furniture under there.
Right.
And I understand you're limited to your 35 and your 10. But then you start creating other outdoor areas that maybe were not intended within the code to be there. If I take an area, if I take a walkway and I'm 12-foot wide, 10-foot high, and I start creating a lot of arches, or somehow closing that area up more and more, is that allowed?
Again, that's something we'll look at in terms of the vocabulary of what the existing house is, what the proposed addition is. If they coincide and it's acceptable to do arches, and then we recommend that. If it isn't, then we'll just say, hey, you know, come up with another vocabulary that. But I think as far as percentage of enclosure, is that what you're alluding to?
Yes.
That people are going to enclose these things later? I mean, that's an ongoing battle in this city with everything and anything, whether it's a code change or whatever. I mean, we deal with this stuff with code enforcement all the time, where people take existing gazebos in the backyard and all of a sudden they're air conditioned and enclosed and they have a dance floor, you know?
But once it is enclosed, we'll take a look at it. It will be part of the FAR calculation or building area calculation. And now once it's enclosed, it will be part of the 35 and not the 45 now. So there are other, you know.
No, I know what he's inferring. Is the percentage of openings and how enclosed the structure is.
open on all
It's still
sides.
open air, it's not air conditioned. The only thing that triggers you into the 35% rule is the air conditioning. Now it's livable space.
No.
I think that should be up to the board. I mean, because then we're gonna be very prescriptive.
Again,
I think,
That's kind of
That
our
would-
posture also. That's why I'm trying to defend the idea, because I think it's a good concept. I think it's a beautiful space. I think it's a great backyard to enjoy your home. And our temperature, our climate lends itself to outdoor living. And I think it's a positive feature that doesn't change anything in the code today in terms of square footage
I
or
agree
additional.
with you that it's a positive thing and it's a connection. I'm just worried about some of the abuse that will happen with it. And I
That is
just
a
don't
different
know how
discussion. Yeah, I agree.
you can,
How to do that? Is it subjective? Is it not subjective when it comes? Is it written in the code that says your
mean,
walkway can't be more than X amount wide, period? It can't be more than a percentage. I think there has to be just a few more definitions in there, to me. How did this come about? Was this sponsored by
I
commission?
just want to clarify something. If they propose to enclose it with zoning will say, I'm sorry, you are at your maximum square footage allowed for your property.
When you go ahead and do your roof line, that's going towards your 35 and your 10?
If you're going to go ahead and do what, sorry?
If you're connecting your roof line,
If it's more than
you've got
5
a 35% and you've got a 10%. Now you're connecting it.
But yeah, you can't do that, right? Because you're
Can't-
beyond the 45%.
Can't do it now.
Right.
So what I'm concerned about is existing properties that have this and now want to connect it. If they built it at a 35 and a 10.
Can't do it.
This won't help.
They can't.
Can't do it.
They will be
Cannot do it.
rejected.
Okay.
They cannot do it.
Cannot
You,
do it.
you don't have to worry about that. They're just gonna tear all these little detached areas down.
true.
And then add to it. I mean, that's what, they're going to do. The other thing is that, we're having the same problem when you came before us with the three-story thing. Remember, we started talking about the three-story, then all of a sudden someone had a refrigerator, a jacuzzi up there. I don't understand what is driving these changes, by staff. We have so many bigger fish to fry. It is amazing to me that first let's try to make a third story on a two-story limitation of the house. I don't think it's funny. I really don't. I find it really offensive because I go through this city and I see all these beautiful homes on North Greenway, and they have exactly what you're describing, except they were built in 1926. Beautiful homes. They have larger properties, but they have these connections and all these things. And they're not the gross ones that are being built today. Well, I want a 12-story. Maybe what we should do is limit the height. And if they want to have a higher height, let them go to Doral and build it there. There's a certain amount of character and charm. And with these shoeboxes that are being built in this city, we're losing that charm. It's not just the big commercial buildings. We're talking about now the city and the neighborhoods and the scale. I think that when you only have 25 feet, you increase another 4 or 5 feet to the height of a tie beam, it makes a big difference on the perception.
But
No,
Felix,
but we're not
here.
increasing the 25-foot tie beam height.
No, I'm giving you that as an example.
Oh, okay.
And what I'm saying, Juan, and you know it, you live in a beautiful
course, of
home,
course. No, I
And
understand.
the whole point is you just go around the corner, almost on the intersection of North and South Greenway, and you have some of the most beautiful homes, about 4 or 5 of them in a row.
And that's kind of my point. I live in a historic house, and my living
you
room
do.
has an 11-foot ceiling. I love it. It's the most beautiful space in my house. Everybody that goes there is in awe.
Yeah.
Because other houses next to me are 8-foot ceilings, 9-foot ceilings, maybe a 10. So the concept of a higher ceiling to us is acceptable. It depends on how you carve it out and how you design it. And I agree. Some houses that have been built in the prior years may have not addressed that properly, but it's something that we look at extensively at the board level, and we try to vet that as much as possible.
And I mean recently. These are homes that have been built recently. And it's just, concerning to me because we're taking away the character. The other thing is we're incentivizing people to just knock down houses that really are beautiful, so they could put up these monstrosities that don't have the charm.
But Felix, we're here today just to talk about the connection between the 10 to the 35. I'm not disagreeing with you,
No,
please.
what I'm
I
saying-
don't disagree with you. I actually agree with you.
Technically, you're correct, but it's one thing is to discuss the usable separation, all right, between these things. I get that all day, and that's fine. But we are going into a prescriptive code.
So if I may, this came about from a resident
Could
who
I,
reached out
could
to
I
me.
ask you to
Commissioner
state
Ariel
your name
Hernandez.
For the
and
record.
address for the record, please?
This came about from a resident who reached out to me. Their property, they're working on an addition.
Could I ask you to please state your name for the record?
Oh,
just for the
I
court
just
re-
did.
Oh, I
You got it?
apologize.
Okay.
I did not hear it.
No problem.
Thank you.
The resident lives in a 5,000 square foot lot. Their house has maxed out. They wanted to build a terrace that they can use with their family for their barbecue in the back of the house. So it would fit under their 45%, however, it cannot be attached to their house. So they had to have it separated. So on a rainy day, all of a sudden that area is no longer usable because it has to be separated from the house. So I reached out to staff and I said, is there a way for us to find where if it is an open space, it can be attached to the house so that it can be usable space? At the end of the day, the livelihood and the ability of our residents to use their properties in the best way they can should be our end goal. And I agree with Mr. Pardo. We want to make sure that this also doesn't open up for the mega mansions that we're seeing in the city that are transforming our historic areas into areas where you don't really recognize anymore. You know, that house that was built right off of Bird Road that looks like it doesn't fit in Coral Gables. Heard about it many times. So this is just finding a way where residents now have an ability to use their backyards or whatever space they have in a way where it connects to their house and they don't have to have this separation. This resident ended up having to have I think it was a 3-inch separation at the end between their house and their terrace so that it wasn't attached. So all of a sudden, rainy days, can't walk out there. So that's the reason this came about. Now, I've been listening on the way here to the discussion. I think there's a lot that needs to be considered and potential changes that we can make to it to make it better and ensure that it doesn't open the door for additional other ways that it can be taken advantage of, and make sure that it really gets to the grassroots of making sure that it helps the livability of our residents. So I'll take any questions anybody has.
I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
That example that you gave, which was the 5,000 square foot,
Mm-hmm.
and now the structure in the back where they're maxed out, how do they attach it if we allow this? Doesn't it count against their
But
percentage?
they're already under construction. This would no longer work for them. So in their case, they're already, their plans are approved. They're moving forward the way it is. I'm just looking for a solution for future residents who
So
will
it
be in the
doesn't
same
help-
situation.
It doesn't help that
It
individual
does not.
that
That,
can't.
they're already under construction. It's not going to change things for them. They never even asked for this. I just met with staff and tried to say, hey, let's find a solution that works for others so that they don't find themselves in the same situation.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I'd like to address the Commissioner. The way this was presented to us does not address the specific issue that you came up with. The point I'm making is that if this is changed the way that it's been proposed to us, it will lead to the possibility of, again, abuses of things. And that's, you know, I've said it over and over again. One thing is to write the formula, but you have to test it. You have to have the ability to test it under certain circumstances before you fly it. And the problem is that hasn't been tested under that situation. The way I see it right now, it's just going to increase massing and do all the things that aren't necessarily. And it could be easily fixed, and again, this is not what was presented to us, where it could say, for example, and I think that maybe the other board members, the architects that may agree, is that maybe you limit it to the back 50% distance from the front property line where these attachments would occur, and then all of a sudden your massing can change completely. So it could be done that way if that seems to be.
But what would happen if you have a,
Corner lot.
Side yard.
I mean,
But the reality is most of our homes, the front yard,
it's never an issue.
about 40% of your yard, of the front of your house is behind the first 40% of your lot.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I don't think that would
Naturally,
be a
it's
major
there,
issue.
that's a given. It's not
Correct. I
gonna
don't think
change.
that'll be a major issue. And I apologize for not having been here. I wasn't aware this was on the agenda today. So it wasn't until I started watching that I got in my car and I headed over here.
Yeah.
If not, I would have been here for the presentation portion.
See, to me, the key here is that no matter what you do, you cannot exceed the 35 plus the 10%. You're limited to 45. So we're not given, they could do today a 35% on main structure. They could do 10% accessory 1 inch away. Or in the case of your 3 inches.
Correct.
And they're fine with that.
Right.
All this is doing is keeping the 35%, that 10% may be only 8%, so you could have 2%, whatever it is, to get your connector. To me, you're not adding anything more than is allowed today. You're making better for the resident. To me, I think this is a very simple mechanism to make a better quality of home than we have today.
And Mr. Behar, that was my request. My request was that we not increase to the 45% that's allowed. It was just, let's find a way where it is more usable for the resident. You see many homes where they have a detached terrace out back. All of a sudden, rainy summer days, you can't use your backyard. Whereas if it was attached, you can go out there, you can sit out there, you can watch your ball game, you can have a barbecue with your family. But if it's not, and one of the things we had talked about, I'm not sure if I made it in here, was ensuring that there were at least 2 open sides, correct? Yes. So if it was attached to the home and it's an L-shaped home, it can be out there, but at least 2 of the sides needed to be open.
And the reason that the reason I just brought up the suggestion, Robert, about the 50, pushing it back 50%, is to make sure that all these projects don't get pushed forward, which increases the massing issue.
But you have a minimum setback that you gotta adhere to. You're not changing that.
That's 25 feet on 100.
So I could do that. I could do a house, to my front setback. This is, the 10% that is on the back naturally, I'm just gonna connect it. If I have, let's say that little structure is 8%, whatever, I'm just allowed to connect it with a minimum. If the accessory structure is 5%, I could do the covered connector a little bit bigger. You're not deviating from what we are allowed to do today.
The only difference is that up to now, okay, we haven't been given the right amounts. I'm not saying the prescriptive amounts, but I haven't been given more information to be able to say I'm okay with it.
Felix, they have. I disagree. They said 35 and 10. That's it. You're there. What else? You can.
Okay, so you're comfortable because it's just mathematical, 35 and 10.
That's what they could do today.
Exactly, but the massing component has just been completely ignored.
No, because they could do, what? It could be worse, where in the case like, the resident approached Commissioner Fernandez, where they could do it 3 inches away. To me, that's a worst case.
That's correct. But
and
that
you
would
could
have
do that today.
That would be an easy fix by saying it has to be at least 5 feet, or it has
Well,
to be
but you can't, because now you can have your cake and eat it too, and impose more regulations that you're allowed to do it today. I think originally I thought of putting a limitation on the width, but the fact that you have a percentages to adhere to is gonna give you that.
And just to
You know what, if I
clarify,
can
so-
just jump in here for a second. This was presented, I've got a garage over here and I have a house over here and I want to walk protected from here to there. That's what it was presented as. Now we're talking about, I want to extend my patio. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, that's what they present.
Okay, it's not
which was
connecting to
my
another
request.
structure, it's let me add a patio. Is that correct? Or is it attaching two structures?
Should I show the diagrams again? So there's 2 scenarios. Remember, there's a scenario of the attached building that you can't get to without it being attached. If you get attached, it becomes part of 45%, right? And there's the other
You forget the
scenario-
percentages, I'm trying to look at the visuals, because I'm thinking, man, okay, you want to get to your garage, you don't want to get wet, okay, it's a 4-foot wide sidewalk covered to your garage. And now we're talking about a patio.
Right, a courtyard, right?
But
with
you got
loges
limited-
facing the courtyard with those images of the.
But Sue, you're limited to your percentage. So if you want to have a huge outdoor space that's open, like the middle down
No,
below,
I
then
understand.
your house is going to be much bigger air conditioned.
I understand, but I thought it was connecting two structures. That's how it was presented, connecting two structures.
It is connecting to structure. There's just no limit on the width of that connector. It's all predicated by the percentage.
Right, so I think the 2 variations, one is what I had proposed regarding future construction. The other one is for existing residents who have a similar situation, so that they can address, I guess, the issue that they're having. Whether it's a detached garage or a detached terrace, now they can connect it as long as they don't pass that 45%.
Gotcha,
But it has to remain open space.
okay,
That's
but
the key.
in your scenario with your neighbor, they just wanted to extend their patio.
They just wanted to create a terrace. They did not have a terrace. They just have an open backyard. I think they were in the process of having a pool out there, so they wanted to have an area where they had a barbecue and some chairs to sit down. And in order for them to have that, because of their being, I think at 32 or 33%, in order to attach it to the house, it would have to be, I think it was like 3 feet. So in order for them to build something that was usable, it had to be detached from the house. And I think they came up with 3 inches because of the separation of the roofs.
They just wanted to attach it to their house,
Correct.
an awning.
Right, it was just basically an outdoor terrace where they could have a barbecue and some chairs in the rear of the house.
If we're done, I feel comfortable. I'll make a motion to approve this item.
So we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I would like to second, but with an amendment.
Negotiation.
I would like to see that this type of a structure as a in-between structure, because what the honored commissioner presented was actually an addition that he's trying to get in under the 45%, so that it is actually an auxiliary structure now attached to the house, which then by right increases the size of the main house by 10%. Whereas before we had 35% for the main house and 10% for an auxiliary structure. Now you have 45% for the main house and no auxiliary structure. That's the
Right,
upshot.
45% overall. You're just moving that 10% and attaching it, but only if it's open air.
Defining open air being,
Open air being loggias, breezeways, porches, and other open-air structures.
An
so
awning.
it has to
On
be
page
open
4.
on at least two sides.
We can clarify that, that's
Okay,
fine.
we need to clarify that.
Right.
That it should be to promote the movement of air across the space, so you don't have an L necessarily. Sorry for the commissioner's example, because that may not work. But the idea is
and
that.
if it's open on 3 sides, which was the initial conversation
Even
I had,
better. If it's
I
open
think
on
it
3
works out
sides,
better
then-
because once you enclose 2 sides, then you're opening up to a lot of different things. I'm okay with it being open on 3 sides, just to ensure that that is not an enclosed space.
My position is just
Guys,
at least
the
open it
co-reporter-
on
Wait,
2
wait.
sides. From,
It has to be on 2 sides.
on 2 sides.
Because
A
3
minimum.
sides, then you don't have a connector. Then it's not connecting.
Okay, so, and that's my
I'll
addition,
accept your friendly amendment.
and then I will second it.
Has to be rewritten.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Robert?
You know what, discussion. I think this has to be rewritten. I mean, we talked,
I was
It
gonna
has to be
say-
rewritten.
I was going to say the same thing, because I know that the intent is right. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with the friendly amendment component of it, but I think we got to get this right. I mean, I don't want staff to use their imagination on this. I think staff should look at the transcript, get it right, do it the right way, put in the caveats that have been discussed here, and then come back and then get it approved.
Well, any other discussion? No. We have a motion. We have a second. Let's go ahead and call the roll, please.
Julio Galapia,
Yes.
Sue Cavalazi,
no.
Felix Pardo,
No.
Javier Simon,
Yes.
Chip Feathers,
No.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
A.B. Edenstead,
Yes.
What is it? What's the
It's a 4 to
vote
3.
count?
It's
4
a
to
4 to
3.
3.
Okay, so it's recommended for approval with the amendment that it has to be open air on 2 sides.
2 sides, 2 sides.
2 sides.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
We have approved things before, and then we don't see a follow-up. I would like staff to give us the final resolution, the one that will be going to the commission for approval, so we could read it. And it's just, I don't think we should be just reading our verbatim minutes. I think we should actually look at how it turns out before, and that's the importance of.
I agree with
how
you,
it's done.
but then it doesn't come back to us for a vote on how it's going to commission. At that point, it's going to commission for their vote and their discussion.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is that nobody has cleaned this up right now. And I don't think it's quite fair to this board, or any board for that fact, because, I don't want to say, you voted against this, and then all of a sudden, it was written differently, or the other way around.
And this is what
I
I've been
agree.
bringing up. This is what I've been bringing up at every meeting for the past 5 meetings.
And
We
that
have
is-
to see what it is, because I don't know what this is. I mean, what we talked about right now is not in here.
But
If it is, it's so vague, it's left to subjective interpretation,
But
and I'm not
Sue-
comfortable with that.
Sue, isn't it then at the purview of the commission, they're the elected officials to make a determination, and if they see fit to bring it back to the planning and zoning board, then that's when it comes back to us to review it or tweak it or go further. But to me, if we do a vote and that vote passes, how do you move forward?
No, I'm not saying that to come back to us. I would like to see what the sausage, looks like at the end of the
Well,
day.
the good thing is, in this particular kitchen today, we have our sous chef next him here that gonna be able to go to a commission meeting and say, this is what the board intended to be, and if there's a misconception or whatever, it could be clarified.
Right.
And I think Commissioner Fernandez, since he's here, he sees what our intent is clearly was for this item.
And I think his intent is the same, to be honest with you. The way I see it, his intent is the same.
And to address the concern, we did hear you, and we have been for every single email, including a recap at the end of the email that sends links to the Legistar item that has the cover memo, that has the draft ordinance, resolution, whatever it is, so that you guys can see what the commission is seeing. So we took that into account.
Had in this past email?
Yes, I sent that on Friday.
Okay.
It was there.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I will say, being here is a different experience than what we get at the commission. A lot of times, we do not get the comments. So all we get is, there was a 7-0 vote, there was a 4-3 vote, and being here presents us with the opportunity of really understanding what the will of this board is. And I think it's important. I think this is the most important board in this city, following the commission. And the participation of each board member and the comments of each board member can really enhance the legislation that we pass on the commission to ensure that our residents are getting the best services from our city. So I agree with you. I'd be open to deferring the item and sending it back when it comes to commission to ensure that it is properly vetted. I appreciate the votes in support and the concerns that you have all voiced today. And I'll commit to ensuring that it comes back to this board for another look at the final piece of legislation.
Commissioner Fernandez, I just want to make a point. What you said now has been my concern, and which is, hey, they voted, 4-3 to approve. But it gets lost in the weeds because you don't have the verbatim transcripts. You don't have the discussions. You could, if you had enough hours in the day, go through our entire, 1 hour discussion on this item.
They do have the minutes, doesn't the commission?
Unfortunately, we don't get them on time.
No.
So a lot of times, things come to commission and the verbatim minutes have not been submitted on time.
Exactly. And-
So
and-
at times we do, at times we don't, and I'll make a call to my appointee to the committee to get an idea of what was actually discussed and what came up during conversation. Or I'll just have to refer back to the video. At least the city is doing a pretty good job of posting the YouTube videos. It is live. It is always available for residents to watch and for us to watch, and that is extremely helpful. But the transcripts do take some time to actually come through. So we sometimes, if a vote is taken today and this goes up in a commission meeting next week, there isn't enough time for us to actually receive that.
And that is the problem, Mr. Chairman, because, we're assuming they have this. And it's not necessarily there. And this is on this one small item. Sometimes it's big projects that we review, and that's not fair to them. And, it's almost like dealing with, buying a used car.
I thank you for your time.
Thank you,
And I
Commissioner.
thank you all for your service to our city and for your dedication to this board.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on. The next agenda item, please. Mr. Fowler?
Item E2, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 10, Parking and Access, Section 10-109, Remote Off-Street Parking and Payment in Lieu, Section 10-111, Shared Parking Reduction Standards, Section 10-112, Miscellaneous Parking Standards, Article 14, Process, Section 14-204, Transfer of Development Rights, to address the applicability of these provisions to projects utilizing provisions of the Live Local Act, Chapter 2024-188, Laws of Florida, providing for repeal of provision, severability clause, codification, providing for an effective date. Item E2, public hearing.
Jennifer Garcia, Planning and Zoning Director. If I could have the PowerPoint, please. So this is the long-anticipated PowerPoint that we've been talking about for a few months now about Live Local. So I'll be going through the snippets of the act, both from 2023 and for 2024, last year glitch bill. So as you know, this is a preemptive bill by the Florida State Legislature, and they signed into law by the governor back in 2023. It was signed in March of 2023, and effective July 1st of 2023. And then a year later, they came through with a glitch bill, Senate Bill 328, and that changed some elements, added some more preemptions. So a preemptive bill is basically the state's way of preempting certain aspects of a municipality and county. So it's throughout the whole act. A municipality must authorize, must consider, must do this. So going through the act, so a city must authorize development if it has 40% affordable housing, and that's between 30% and 125% of AMI, adjusted median income. And that is also only in our mixed-use districts, so that applies to Coral Gables. It's also in our commercial, industrial districts, which we don't have in Coral Gables anymore. We only have mixed-use districts. So looking at a map in Coral Gables, all the red is our mixed-use districts. So you see that along H Street. You see it down Ponce Leon. You see a big chunk of it in our downtown, as well as a couple blocks in the Biltmore Way. Going south, the map on the right side is the industrial former industrial district, the design innovation district, and pockets of mixed use along US 1, and then the small urban center that's next to south of Miami. So affordability is defined by Florida state statutes. Monthly rents not exceeding 30% of the amount, which represents a percentage of the median adjusted gross annual income, the AMI. So our AMI is based on Miami-Dade County. So looking at floridahousing.org, they have some resources there to see what our AMI is and what's considered to be affordable. So the median income is $79,400. So if you look at the box on the right, you see the rent limit by number of bedrooms and units. So for example, a studio, which has 0 number of bedrooms, could rent at 120% AMI for $2,300. Just to give a estimate. That would be the maximum that you could be able to rent 40%, again, of the whole building could have to have that to qualify for Live Local preemption. So moving on, the maximum height is also preempted by the state to be the highest allowed height within 1 mile, and that's within Coral Gables. That's not including South Miami, not including City of Miami, only within Coral Gables. And the glitch bill of last year added some unuseful language about single-family height as it relates to being adjacent by 2 or more sides and different height allowing. So this is a map, again, showing the north part of Coral Gables on the left side, the south part of Coral Gables on the right side. And that gray area is the 70 feet. That's our mid-rise height. So that's that gray area. You can see it expands most of our urban areas. and 150 feet, which is the kind of light yellow area, and how much of that encompasses the city. As you know, our city is very small and compact, so 1 mile is quite expansive. So you can see it encompasses most of H Street, all of our downtown, Biltmore Way, and along US 1. And so moving on, yes, they are allowed to have a bonus if they satisfy our requirement for the bonus. They'd be eligible to get the Coral Gables Mediterranean Design bonus. And looking at what that would be, the green area, those 4 floors, is kind of make-believe MX1 low-rise zoning. That pink area in the middle is the height preemption that Live Local Act is now allowing a affordable developer to do, a max of 150 feet. So that would be the max, as long as MX3 is within 1 mile of the property. And again, the med bonus would be on top of that height. And that'll be the maximum. So they cannot go above, in our city, with Mediterranean bonus, beyond 190.5 feet. And then density is analyzed throughout the city. So the highest allowed density on any land in the municipality. So our highest density is in our mixed-use districts. That's a little hard to read, but the highest density is 125 units an acre. And then administrative approval for density, for height, for land use, and FAR. If you look at this, this is kind of the meat of the law of the local act for administrative approval. However, our zoning code does require building sites at 20,000 square feet or more to go through, again, the Board of Architects, of course, and Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission. Now, if a property is less than 20,000 square feet, then it would just go through the typical DRC, Development Review Committee, and the Board of Architects before submitting for a building permit. And then the FAR, as I mentioned, came about last year with the glitch bill, and they can have a maximum of 150% of the highest currently allowed floor area ratio. In our city, the highest floor area ratio is 3.0, so 150% of that would be 4.5 FAR. So looking at this, qualifying developments, they must, it's not just a giveaway, they must be zoned in a mixed-use district in our city. We don't have industrial and commercial, so it's only in the mixed-use districts. They have to provide at least 40% of the residential units to be affordable, and that's for 30 years at least. And that would be tracked by a covenant on the property. And then it must contain at least 65% or more residential use, as in you can't have one affordable housing unit and have a very tall office building, for example. So they meet those qualifications per the state, then they are preempting us on, again, the density, the height, and the FAR, so they can have the highest density in Coral Gables, which is 125 units an acre. The height is permitted within 1 mile within city limits. And then the floor area ratio would be 150% of the highest allowed, which is 3.0, which total would be 4.5 FAR. So comparing our typical mixed-use zoning, if they would follow our zoning code, versus the preemption of the Live Local Act, you can see the different heights, MX1, MX2, MX3. MX1 allows for 45 feet or 77 feet with med bonus. However, if they are within 1 mile of MX3 and they're using the Live Local preemption process, then they could go up to 150 feet or 190.5 with med bonus. Same thing with MX2, 70 feet or 97 feet with med bonus per our zoning code. But if they are within 1 mile of MX3, then they could go up higher to 150 or 190.5 with med bonus. FAR, as you know, is 3.0 or 3.5 with med bonus. Live Local Act would allow for 4.5 FAR. The density remains the same, 125 units an acre. Affordable units, as we know, we don't have a requirement for a minimum amount of affordable units, but for them it would have to be a 40% of the residential units. And the open space and other requirements, setback requirements would remain the same. This is a hard to see screenshot of our Live Local Act webpage that we have through the city. It's at coralgables.com/department/development services. It's on our development services website. And There you can see a description of what Live Local Act. You have links to the 2 state bills from 2023 and 2024. You have a link to our administrative order, as well as a link to the commission's resolution as required by the state statute. Now, moving on to what we actually have to adopt is the parking requirements. So the state is mandating that we require a consideration of parking reductions within a quarter mile of a transit stop. So this map, again, is the north side of Coral Gables on the left side, the south side on the right side. And you can see that the bus lines are running along H Street, the trolley runs along Ponce Leon, another bus lane runs along, not bus lane, bus route runs along Douglas Road. And on the right side, you can see the south Coral Gables and different bus lines that run along there. So what you can see in the white would be within a quarter mile of those bus routes. And that would be eligible for a parking reduction per state statute for us to consider a parking reduction. So we're proposing a 10% parking reduction. That's in line with our shared parking increment. They had to fulfill, had to be, of course, be a quarter of a mile of a transit stop, which is a metro rail or a trolley stop. I'm sorry, metro bus and trolley stop. Must be accessible by safe and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, crosswalks, sidewalks, bike paths, etc. As well as the commission would consider the impact of any parking reduction and its compatibility with the area. So this is, again, is required to be adopted by the municipality. And then the state statute also requires, like it's a 20% parking reduction if you're within a half a mile of a major transportation hub. Now, looking at this map, you can see the major transportation hubs would be the metro rail stations at Douglas, University, and South Miami. So you can see the area that are encompassing those major transportation hubs. And they have criteria in the state statute that has to be, again, within a half a mile of a transportation hub, as well as has to have available parking within 600 feet of the development and accessible by safe pedestrian means of infrastructure. So the summary, the preemption is touching height. Height would be the highest allowed height within 1 mile within Coral Gables. The density would be the highest density on any land in the city. The FAR is 150% of the highest currently allowed. The use would be allowing residential use on mixed-use commercial zoning, and the parking, the 20% reduction would be required within a half a mile of major transportation hubs, and then for us to consider a reduction, and we're proposing to be 10% within a quarter mile of a transit stop. So in addition to the proposed amendment required by the state for the parking reduction, we are proposing a few more amendments to our code to better align any future Live Local application to be more consistent and compatible with our area. So prohibiting the utilization of remote parking except on American Mile where it is required. So any Live Local application would not be allowed to request a remote parking with their proposed development. They're also not allowed to apply a shared parking reduction in addition to what the reduction is already getting from the state. So for example, if they get 20% reduction, they can't go ahead and reduce it furthermore with a shared parking study. It's one or the other. And then also, they'll be prohibited from utilizing transfer development rights, or TDRs, into their property, since their max FAR would be 4.5. Addition of TDRs would be much more incompatible development. So that's also in the proposed text amendment before you today. And then since we published this back in September of last year, there has been 2 proposed bills, both by the House and also by the Senate. We have reviewed that. We're going through that currently right now. We're not prepared to have a reaction on that, just because it's moving through the process at the state level. But then just to recap, you guys, we have not have any applications for Live Local. We have not reviewed or processed any Live Local applications in the city, and we haven't approved any. There hasn't been any developments that have been approved to use Live Local within Coral Gables. The closest one that's within our borders would be the Sears redevelopment on Coral Way and Douglas Road. So just to emphasize, there's other large developments on our borders, but those are not live local applications. So we did reach out to the city of Miami to see what the update is on the Sears property. They haven't had any movement since last summer when it was first reviewed. That's it. Yes.
Do we have the actual, what you're proposing as amendment? Do you have that as a slide, or do you all have the actual amendment? Because it's pretty small. There's a lot of the conversation here about the Live Local Act, but the actual amendments that we're doing to our code right now are limited to a couple of pages. It's attached to the report on,
Yes, page 3, I guess kind of starting in page 2, but page 3 of your, and page 4 as well, of your staff report has those amendments.
The implementation order?
No, the staff report from September 11, 2024. But Grace can pass those out.
While we do that, can I ask the attorney a question? One is, in Jennifer's presentation, she said that the highest density is what is the maximum allowed in the city. She stated 125 units per acre. But in fact, in the CBD, there's no limitation on density. Would that not be the case? Because you allow what is the maximum allowed in a municipality. So I think that's, from a legal point of view.
well, we have certain thoughts about how that could be addressed. I'd be happy to discuss that with you on a one-to-one basis, but I'd rather not
And then,
chat about what possible responses we would have to that.
and then the second, to you as well, is we're proposing additional restrictions such as remote parking, shared parking, and the TDRs.
Right, well, I think we feel that these bonus programs that we've provided, we had envisioned based upon what we thought height density would be. But when the Live Local Act came out, it was determined that, well, wait, that's one thing if we're doing it under regular development, but it would not be fair to do that, to offer those bonuses for those particular
But,
developments.
and this just, just trying to place devil's advocate here. Are we not setting restrictions that, based on the Live Local Act, they're entitled to do? Because
Well,
are we making that interpretation?
No, I think what it is that there are bonus programs that we have to do, which is if they offer a Mediterranean style, that they're subject to it, but they're getting so much more in the Live Local Act that where we feel that we have the right to restrict their ability to get TDRs and the other restrictions that would even make their developments more intense. So we're of the belief that these provisions thus far, now, we may do this and the legislature may look at this and say, oh, well, we're not going to let you do that. That's a possibility. But right now, we don't see that there's a restriction on our providing this restriction.
So let me piggyback off of Robert. Since we're offering these changes, why aren't we also including in there no med bonus?
Because the law changed in the last legislative session, and specifically, do you want to bring that up again?
I think we have a better
It's
chance.
It's one thing when we have a direct statement by the legislature, you have to offer this. That's not, we haven't gotten it for this.
But you have a better chance of restricting the med bonuses than you have the other, because my understanding, and I've been trying to be very proactive and familiar with it, you are not allowed to ask for any deviation, any variances, any waivers, to what is allowed in a city. In my opinion, in my eyes, the med bonuses could constitute as a waiver, a variance from the base code, what is allowed under the base code. I think that we may have a better chance of limiting the med bonuses.
Well, here's my fear. So say they get the med bonus, and all of a sudden, they're at 190. So another Live Local comes in and they say, well, our base is gonna be 190, and we want a med bonus on top of that.
Well, I think
No,
you
it's not
should
allowed.
speak.
No, you're not allowed to do
Why?
that. Because I think
The
the
comp
med
plan and
bonus.
zoning code's very clear, and if you get med bonus, this is your height. It's not in
Yeah.
addition to whatever height you have. It's very clear. If you get med bonus, you get this height or this height. It doesn't go beyond that. It doesn't contemplate any kind of higher zoning or higher building height to go beyond that.
Codino building, 204 feet, that's not 190.
Yeah, so they're in a pad, so they're part of within the CBD on certain streets, within a limiting density, I think of 100 units an acre or something like that. Don't quote me on that. So the different animal, different legislation to go through.
I don't understand your explanation.
No, I don't either.
Can you break that down a little
So
bit different?
Codina was allowed to build beyond 190 feet because there's language in our pad that allows that. Within the CBD, limiting the height to, limiting the density to 100 and something units an acre.
No, the limit in the pad does not allow you to put additional height on it. The limit in the pad allows you all sorts of things such as setbacks, but not additional height.
Yes.
And I always, you're shaking your head, so I'm wrong. Where does it say height?
So there was a ordinance set forth by the commission to add on to the pad at the very end
No,
after.
I understand that. What I couldn't understand also is that all of these things that we're talking about tonight, right? Is this based on the zoning, or is this based on the land use plan? Everything we're talking about with Live Local, are we using the height of the comprehensive land use plan, or are we using the height of the existing zoning on the particular property?
So most of the time, it's consistent with each other.
No.
So if you're
no,
mixed
that-
use, you are also
I'm
high
asking a
rise.
very specific question. Right now, we have a comprehensive land use plan. The comprehensive land use plan is the limit, the ceiling. But underneath that, you have the zoning. So when you're talking about Live Local Act, are you using our extended height of Live Local with the comprehensive land use plan? For example, just to separate it, the height at 190 feet for every single property that you showed there.
So I think in general, we're using the zoning, but again, our zoning and our land use are usually very consistent,
They're
except
not
for
very
areas on Miracle Mile, which has a land use of high rise, and we're not allowed to go high rise on Miracle Mile.
I'm sorry, you're saying that they're very consistent. So let's say a project that has a zoning, that has a limitation of 60 feet. And the land use plan says you can go up to 90 feet. Which one do you use, the 60 feet for zoning or the land use plan?
Well, I
So
think
I would use the
Felix,
60 feet in zoning, but again, I do not know many properties that are
Robert, I'm
inconsistent.
exactly what you're saying, because what you're talking about is then you're gonna say for height, it's whatever the highest building is within the mile and the thing. That's fine, that's height. But what I'm trying to say is that when you get into the weeds on Live Local, for example, Broward County, City of Hollywood, what's it called?
Margaritaville.
There you go. You know exactly where I was going. They're being sued right now by a developer because they said, Live Local, I want to be as high as Margaritaville. Margaritaville was given all sorts of bonuses on every single one, and the city determined that the bonuses were not on the table when it came to height. They were not on the table when it came to height. Although that building measures X, they said, no, 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 it's gonna be Y.
Because that property, you said it, probably got waivers and additional approval that you are not allowed to seek under the live local. You know, it has to be what is permitted without any special approval exception. So in the city of Coral Gables, you would have allowed, for example, 190 feet if I'm in the MX mixed use district in the by the collection, let's say. All right, that's a mixed use district. The CBD, which is 1 mile away, you're allowed to do up to that height in that area.
The problem is that,
But I cannot go more than the 190.
and the problem is that on Miami Beach, they've already had a couple of developers trying to utilize Live Local, and they ran into a problem. The problem they ran into was that they could get the amount of units, but they couldn't get it within the height. In other words, when they squeezed it one way, it went the other way. Then they tried to get a variance, and they were denied.
Because you are not allowed to seek special variances, waiver, nothing. And that happened in the beach in the Clevelander property.
Correct.
Because it is not a mixed-use property, zonification.
This, in my opinion, well, forget about my opinion. When that particular project that you mentioned before was granted over 200 feet, there was a change of the comp plan, right?
Correct. And the zoning code as well, yes.
And again, here we go again. We change the comp plan as easy as we change zoning. The comp plan theoretically was established, those maximum heights were established specifically wrapping around the idea of concurrency. In other words, all the different things that you need to be able to make development viable. The problem I see is that we are now reaping the rewards at a state level of people now wanting to build even more without the concept of concurrency. In other words, we are building unsustainable projects. And by the way, what happens, Mr. Collar, after the 30 years? Does it turn magically into something else? Because in 30 years now, you don't have enough parking, you have all this density, now those people are going to be paying rent through the nose, it's not affordable anymore, and this is like the Trojan horse, isn't it?
Well, I think that all those questions are excellent questions that you should address to your state representatives. They're the ones that adopted this thing. It was not something that Coral Gables does. What we're trying to do here, I think, is to do what we can and make clear that certain bonuses that we provide are not subject to a Live Local project. And I think that that's a reasonable opportunity. These are things that we're encouraging TDRs in certain areas of the city, but that was based upon a certain level of development. Now, this Live Local project ignores really what our restrictions are, really ignores our zoning, and says, you can build this. So the least we can do is say, well, these bonus programs that the local government has provided, I'm sorry, that's not going to be available to you because you're getting a ton of development based upon the state law. You don't need, in our view, these extra bonuses.
So why aren't we including the med bonus in this? I mean, these are small
because the
potatoes
problem-
in comparison.
Yeah, but the problem is, there's certain things that the legislature has directly preempted us on and said, no, you've got to have, if you offer a bonus program for Med Bonus, you got to offer this bonus program to Live Local. They did this year. Maybe they saw our situation. I don't know why they did it, and when you look at the new law, they're targeting municipalities, trying to preempt them as much as they can, but it's not the new law, which is about 65 pages. I think the House bill is. We've gone through it once, but there's a lot in there. But at least with regard to what we can do, we're doing.
Why? They're bonuses. A bonus is bonus.
Well, I don't think there's bonuses and there's bonuses.
Well,
What do you
let's make it a
think?
bonus. Let's do the big B instead of the small b. I mean, because the med bonus is the issue here. It's not remote parking. It's not TDRs.
Well, I'm not sure that the Med Bonus is really getting you, what they're really getting, the big thing is that they're getting this height within a mile of the city. I mean, that's the huge.
Which is how you're gonna achieve that height through the med bonuses. So you could get the 190 feet 6 inches, okay? And you're gonna be able to get, in my opinion, and based on conversation I'm having with the city of Miami in relationship to the density, you're gonna get the maximum density. In the city of Miami, it's way up because it's 1,000 units per acre, okay? Here, I think the density is gonna go back to the CBD, which there's no cap on the density.
Okay, and Robert, to your point about, in the collection area, they would be able to go to 190. Wouldn't they be able to go to 204? We have a precedent setting.
No, because that got a special exception, special approval for that.
No, not special approval. They followed criteria in our zoning code, and they met that criteria by limiting the density, by limiting the density, being on certain streets, and being within the CBD, and being a pad.
But that
being
got
1 acre or
approval,
more.
that got an approval, a special
Right.
approval from
If they
us.
meet that criteria, then yes, they can have the extra heat, extra height, but they're going to limit their density to do that and provide more open space, which I'm not sure they're
No,
going to do.
but I'm just saying, if that's the tallest building in Coral Gable, is that the tallest building in Coral Gable?
If they meet well, no, the Biltmore is, but if they meet that criteria, they have to meet that criteria in legislation. It's not, we don't interpret it to be that would apply to anyone else except for meeting that criteria in our zoning code.
If they come in as of right, Jennifer, for the Live Local, because that's the intent, that you don't have to, they cannot get 204 feet or whatever the height that is. They're limited at the 190 feet 6 inches.
Why?
Because that's the way that the Live Local is written. To get anything over than what is normally allowed, without going through any hearings, going any approval, you gotta keep it at what is today allowed in that municipality.
Yeah, but are allowed how? By zoning or allowed by the comprehensive land use plan?
It's whatever's, and I'm not gonna say, address exactly that because I'm not sure how they're referring it, but they're referring as the maximum height allowed within 1 mile radius of your location, and the density is the maximum allowed in that municipality as
Whether
well.
it's built or not built.
Correct.
Wait, Chip, you have
I
a
have a
question?
question. Is there a traffic concurrency part to this Live Local? I haven't seen anything about traffic. I've seen parking, I've seen density, I've seen height, but I haven't seen traffic.
I don't think they've addressed concurrency.
Why?
I thought I
Because-
read it in the
Because we're going to
ordinance.
be taking the Metro Rail.
Well, no, I
There
mean,
will be
In
no
the state
traffic.
law,
In the
they've
state
addressed
law.
concurrency?
It mentions it, it doesn't say the word concurrency, but it mentions the elements of concurrency in it.
Can we look at that maybe?
We can look at that.
I mean, why not?
Can I ask, maybe, Jen,
Let
I
me-
don't
See,
know.
the problem is there's certain areas of the city are within the grid, I think, that are an exception to concurrency.
But I don't think South Miami,
No, you're talking about only traffic concurrency, Mr. Collar, which was
Well-
exempted by Miami-Dade County, which is everything that's within
Well, if they don't
the
have-
Palmetto, which is the sea toward the ocean.
That's right.
is exempt from traffic concurrency.
Well, that's Miami-Dade County and the unincorporated area.
No. That's everything. There is a traffic concurrency allowance for every municipality, everything in the county that circle, or not circles, it's an inverted L of the Palmetto Expressway that runs the east to west and then south. And everything toward the bay is exempt from traffic concurrency, and the county commission addressed that for all municipalities. It's not. If not, nobody would meet traffic concurrency because Lejeune Road has been at level F for at least 25 years.
Well, there's other concurrencies. There's water and sewer. If you don't have the sewer, you can't hook up, and that's a problem, right?
And that is correct, and that's what I've been arguing.
Well, that is not addressed in what's before you.
I've got a question.
Because there's a separate
let me ask-
requirement for meeting.
So
water
what
and sewer
about the definition
recurs.
of a transportation hub? I mean, the Metro Rail, is that really a serious transportation hub? Is there a number of people that it has to move? What's the criteria to be a transportation hub?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It's not based on logic. What they do is they actually do a crosshair of an intersection of two bus routes, and that's good enough for the thing. It is absurd.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't resolve anything.
Right.
And you know, these guys are just painting us into a corner.
So let me ask you a question. It said
could-
that a project has to have 65% residential units, right? 65%. And yet, it says 40% must be affordable housing. Is it 40% of the 100% of the project, or is it 40% of the 65% residential?
Yes, of the residential unit. So you can have 65% minimum, you could have 85%, right? But 40% of whatever amount you have has to be affordable.
So what I'm getting at, the 40% of 65 means not too many units necessarily, right? Not too many units to qualify for this.
But
So it's not like we're solving the affordable housing crisis here.
Right, but we're not passing on the Live Local
Be able
Act.
to afford.
Well, that's another issue. Who's going to be able to
That's
afford
been
that?
the whole issue with
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been our whole issue with our affordable crisis in Coral Gables. I mean, we were 970 short when I got on the commission, I think, and I don't know that we've even put a dent in that, because who can really afford a $225,000 or $250,000 condo on affordable? I mean, that's
I agree. I agree.
Listen, at 120% of the income median, look at the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not affordable units.
right. That's what I'm saying. They're not going to be
Oh,
able.
they're-
So they're
You're
putting
telling
us,
me that a two-bedroom unit is gonna be paying $3,000?
That's what I'm saying. That's not affordable housing.
no, it's not. So why aren't we arguing that?
Well, I
Because
I
that's
think there's,
legislation. That's what they.
what's before
Well,
you is not the
legislation
Live
can
Local
change.
Act.
It's changing all the time. There's going to be another revamp of this, isn't there? They're now revamping this for a third time?
They're doing it now.
Yeah, they're
Started about
doing
a
it
month
now.
ago.
And
Right.
so we're really dealing with a moving target. What we're trying to do here
But it's
is
not for
li-
it's not for our benefit, though. This is going to be all, Anthony DeUri is working for the developers. He's the main driver behind this, isn't he, Robert?
There's many people at the state level behind this.
Yeah, well,
My
Anthony
big-
And
DeUri isn't.
I don't think it's Anthony, to be quite honest.
My bigger question is, what has the city done? They've been sitting on their hands for the past 2 or 3 years, not trying to build a coalition with cities in Naples or Orlando or Fort Myers or anywhere in the
Doral.
state, or
Doral
Doral,
soon.
not even in our own neighborhood. And we're just letting, where is the fight from the municipalities against the state of Florida?
Yeah.
And that's a hypothetical, that's not a question to you, but I'm just saying it's extremely disappointing that we as a city have not at least tried to form a group or a foundation to fight this. It's obscene and it's absurd.
Yeah, it's not like we would be on our own. There are a lot of municipalities in Florida that are fighting. We're doing nothing but laying down. I mean, what we're offering here, we're not even addressing the
Put this
med
to-
bonus.
Should we put this?
Anyway.
Well, I think what's going on, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes legally with the city. I would also think that there's a lot of discussion that's going on behind the city that they don't want to come before in an open public meeting and let everybody know what their action is going to be, or their
course to fight it is going to be. That's what I'm feeling from this.
Yeah, but why would Doral sue? Why would Miami Beach sue? Why would, I mean, there's a list of.
But we don't know if the city of Coral Gables is going to sue right now.
Well,
I
then
don't
why are
thi-
we even
they
voting
can't-
on
I don't
this
think
today?
Miami Beach has sued. They
No.
may have been sued, but I don't think that Miami Beach
Yeah.
has sued.
Only Doral, Doral and Hollywood are the only two that I'm aware of.
Well, I think that they worked something out with the developer in Doral.
Let me ask a question before we proceed. Do we have anybody, obviously, we don't have anybody in chambers. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
No.
Anybody on the phone platform?
No.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close it for public comment. My question is, what direction do you need from us tonight? And how do we proceed?
Well, I'll move staff's recommendation. I think that's what you want, right?
That's always helpful.
Is there, well,
But can we do that?
We have a motion. Is there a second before we continue?
Second for discussion. Second for discussion.
Motion, and we have a second from Mr. Javier.
Mr.
So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, sir.
I don't know how many meetings in a row when we've discussed this issue, I've said it over and over and over. I suggested that we follow the track of what Miami Beach did with the Live Local Act and write a separate chapter. And in there, put all the exceptions as they did. I have a feeling that eventually, I think the voters of Florida are going to turn on this legislature, and this is eventually going to go away once the outrage hits the right level, which is a political level. I believe that we should write this as a separate section because it will be easier to amend and also to bifurcate in case that happens too. So the reason I'm saying this is right now we're taking these sections, which staff has identified, and we're peppering them through our zoning code, which will be very difficult to retract later on, alter, and someone is going to simply make a simple mistake. That is why Miami Beach did it in a separate way, which I think would be the right way to do it. I don't mind the issue of the concepts of the different things that have been proposed by staff. I just think that the vehicle is the wrong vehicle to do it. I suggest that they come back with a chapter which is specifically of Live Local, similar to what Miami Beach did. I think it's the most logical way to keep it fresh, separate, where it can be altered, because as Mr. Collar said, right now there is more changes coming, and the same that it's going in the up direction, tomorrow it could be going in the down direction.
My suggestion is that you should move for denial on the basis that you want it to be a separate section and that you're not happy with it the way the staff has done it. It's a motion for denial, and that's your
Well, right now-
recommendation.
Right now, we have a motion for approval and we have a second for discussion.
Right,
So unless
So-
that changes,
right, that's true. But that would be an alternate, if this fails, that would be your
All
motion.
right, and as part of the discussion, I totally agree with Felix. Let's not integrate it. This should be separate.
I will withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my second for discussion.
okay, does anybody want to make another motion? Mr. Pardo,
Okay.
in simple terms?
What Mr. Collar said. That simple terms?
So you move for a recommendation of denial based upon the fact that the city's approach is not to create a separate section, but rather to amend those pieces that need to be amended.
In other words, he wants a separate section.
He wants a separate section.
Yes, we all do.
The city wants to just amend what they feel needs to be amended and not do any more than that.
So Mr. Pardo, is that good?
Yes.
We have a motion. We have Mr. Withers with a second. Any discussion?
What exactly are we doing? So this would be a separate section to,
To the zoning code.
to the zoning code. So
The
what they're
same as
doing
the
is,
one-
Addressing the live local. But
Correct.
what intent is that gonna do? What purpose is that gonna do?
I mentioned that several things. Number one, this is changing almost on a daily basis. If we take these sections, Robert, like parking and remote parking and TDRs, and we start peppering it all over the code, every time that there's a change from the legislature, either going up or down on the thing, it'll be almost
So what,
impossible
okay,
to keep it.
if I understand you correctly,
The other thing is that it allows the city, should this eventually go away, which I agree with Mr. Pardo
To
that it
cut
will,
this.
that it becomes a discrete section which then disappears.
okay, so it will
So
be,
I admire the logic of that.
It is for clarity.
okay, so you're not, whatever the live local is just completely under a different section. That's how we do it.
And that's how Miami Beach has it.
Okay,
I agree also.
okay.
All right, any other discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Sue Kavalansky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salmon,
Yes to deny.
Chip Weiser,
Yep.
Julio Clavia.
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
We have one last thing, and that is item E3. Mr. Caller?
Item E3. An ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code by amending Article 14 Process Section 14-202.6 Building Site Determination to prioritize frontage consistency with existing building sites, allowing under certain circumstances the voluntary demolition of an existing structures that become non-conforming from the separation of the building sites to satisfy non-conforming structure criteria and establish size restrictions on residents in separated building sites based on the square footage permitted if developed as a single building site, providing repeal or provision, severability clause, codification, and providing for an effective date. Item E3, public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Caller. Good evening, Planning and Zoning Board. Final item tonight, proposed text amendment for Section 14-202.6 for building site determinations. This is specifically for the conditional use component of building site determinations. We'll break into just the meaning of building site separation just quickly. If you take a look at the graph on the PowerPoint, right now you'll see a division of an existing building site into two smaller sites. This is only applicable to single family and duplex or MF1 zoning districts. This establishes eligibility for issuing building permits for a residence within one of those sites. So currently, the administrative approval criteria within the code indicates the following. You must have at least one platted lot and a street frontage of 50 feet. You can have no more than one building of an existing previous building site with structures, and that includes walls, fences. There's no more than one building to be rebuilt after voluntarily or involuntarily removing a previous structure. And then it must also meet all of the following. No more than one building site can have 5,000 square feet minimum. No building site shall reduce or diminish less than 50 linear feet of the street frontage. There shall be no encroachments, avoidance of creating nonconformities. And that could also mean having a swimming pool on the adjacent platted lot. There must be an absence of restrictive covenants or a unity of title that currently ties the property in the sense or has restrictions that would not allow any kind of building site separation. So we'll take a quick look at the kind of lots that we traditionally see currently in Coral Gables. Interior lots, corner lots, through lots, and corner through lots. So the current conditions right now, if somebody comes in for a building site determination, if you take a look at the left, you'll see that there are 2 platted lots. It sufficiently meets the frontage, the square footage requirement. This would actually be a property that could administratively be approved for a building site determination. On the other hand, if you take a look at the graph or the site plan that's on the right-hand side, you can see how the existing residence currently straddles the 2 lot lines. Fortunately, that would not be something that could be administratively approved. It would potentially have to go through a conditional use process, which would be the Development Review Committee, Board of Architects, your board, the Planning and Zoning Board, and eventually the City Commission. So right now, the conditional use approval requirements are as follows. And this is for that public hearing component. So proposed building site must be greater or equal to other lots within a 1,000-foot perimeter. Maintains open space, neighborhood compatibility, and historic character. Exceptional or unusual circumstances where it could have multiple street frontings, as we saw that corner through lot as well, as we looked at earlier at the examples. And then the 4th component within the conditional use criteria, you must meet at least 2 of the 3 criteria, and that's where the proposed text amendment, or a portion of it, is being proposed. So comparable street frontage, there is no non-conforming setbacks or encroachments, and there must be continuous ownership of the subject property for at least 10 years. Quickly, we'll just take a look at a case study that was previously approved by City Commission in 2023. This is located at 631 Zamora Avenue. It's an interior lot. It was on the north side of Zamora Avenue. The original building site had 11,300 square feet of net area, and it had 2 platted lots. So what was proposed is that the 2 lots be separated. They met all of the criteria for that conditional use component, except the continuous ownership for 10 years. Now, if you kind of look at the criteria that's mentioned there, you must meet at least 2 of the 3 criteria. They met the comparable street frontages, and there was no nonconformities, no setback or encroachment issues. Another case study is one that we just recently saw that came in front of the board. It's 5810 Maggiore Street, located on a corner through lot on the northwest corner of Draco Avenue and Maggiore Avenue, and the southwest corner of Marmore Ave. So this building site had 20,006 square feet. It had 4 combined lots together. The proposal was to split it into 2 10,003 square foot building sites. As we know, it's currently pending. It was denied in front of the board recently, and it was also not recommended for approval from staff because it did not meet 2 of the 3 criteria. It might have had comparable frontage, but when it came to encroachments and setbacks and that continuous ownership for 10 years, it did not meet that criteria. So once again, this is the conditional use criteria overview for when somebody comes or submits an application and they are not able to administratively approve and the applicant chooses to continue, they feel like they have an opportunity to meet the criteria and go through the public hearing process. So just as the previous text amendment came before you at the first item, this item was also proposed by a city commissioner. So staff did a GIS analysis and just a basic overview. So as of January 2025, within the city of Coral Gables, we've got 13,518 properties with folio numbers. So The parcels that currently have 20,000 square feet, which we're just starting to whittle down the properties, that's 1,747. Then what we did is we took a look at the properties that didn't have any site specifics, that didn't have any historic determination associated with it, and also any kind of site specifics. So then that took us down within the single-family residential zone properties, 239. And that also gave us only 2 multifamily duplex zone properties. So overall, that would be 241 properties that could potentially be affected by the proposed text amendment that we're about to delve into here. So if you take a look at the graph again, this is a 20,000 square foot building site with 4 platted lots. And you can see where it could potentially be separated into 2 10,000 square foot building sites. I know it's a little hard to read. Hopefully you've got the staff report in front of you and the proposed draft ordinance. But for the component that requires 2 of the 3 criteria, you can see that what we've added in the first component, now this is somewhat in the middle of the actual language. It's relatively lengthy, but we added that street frontage of building sites created shall also be equal to or larger than the majority of the existing frontages on the abutting streets. So this also plays a role within that 1,000-foot perimeter as well. If you want later, I can delve into the whole subsection of A there. And then subsection B, what we added here is basically the voluntary demolition of non-conforming structures on properties that have more than 20,000 square feet. So currently, the building site, if it's separated or established and it has less than 10,000 square feet, it would not result in any existing structures becoming non-conforming as it relates to the setbacks, lot area, lot width, depth, ground coverage, and any other applicable provisions on the zoning code. And then the next, and the final portion of the proposed text amendment falls within subsection G. This is actually something that was within the code previously, and then it was taken out recently back in 2022. To kind of give a balance, and as staff has communicated with council and with the city commission that has requested this, we thought we would try to actually add the teeth back in, so to speak, of what we had. So the total square footage of a residence allowed on a separated building site shall be equal to or less than the total square footage that could be constructed on the property if developed as a single building site. So that's exactly what you would look at there on the property of the 20,000 versus the two 10,000 square foot building sites. Whoops, forgive me. So that concludes, let me just go ahead and reiterate real quick, is that really what the proposal is doing, or what the proposed text amendment is, we're affecting 2 of the 3 criteria that's required within the conditional use component for an approval for a building site determination, with frontage consistency and that voluntary demolition of a non-conforming structure if the lot, the original lot, has got more than 20,000 square feet, and then adding that condition back into the code to where if a building site determination is actually approved, a residence, and the residence is allowed, would not be able to exceed, they would only have to be equal or less than the total square footage of a residence on the original subject property. So staff is here to answer questions.
I have a question for you. You keep mentioning 2 of 3. It's always been 3 of 5.
From what I understand, that was That was changed a couple years ago.
That was changed.
Yes, sir.
I was not familiar with that. My understanding was it was always 305. What, okay.
So right now, it's subsection F, and then within F, it's subsection 4. The application satisfies at least 2 of the following 3 criteria. That's how the ordinance currently reads.
So we just had a presentation, which you showed here. And that presentation, even staff's presentation, was talking about the 5 requirements and not meeting. So I'm a little confused.
I'm sorry, we're.
Yes,
5
majority.
requirement. Okay, so we're talking about the entirety of, it's actually, it's not numbered in the code like that. So subsection F has 1, 2, 3, and 4, where we're actually putting the proposed, or we're requesting the proposed text amendments are subsection 4 of subsection F.
Honestly, you're confusing me.
If you take a look at the ordinance or the staff report, I think that'll be helpful.
I did.
Okay.
No, I took a look at it.
Well, I thought there was a recent amendment to the lot split ordinance where they took out one of the requirements. Which one was that?
Jeff Garcia, Planning and Zoning Director. So yes, there was a requirement that used to have, I believe, 4, meet 3 of the 4. The 4th one that was taken out was the restricted covenant or the you need a title requirement because it was kind of,
Oh, now I remember. They were
redundant,
saying
right.
that if the commission is granting it, then essentially what they're doing is modifying a previous covenant they did. Okay?
Right.
So they took that covenant requirement out. So this is what you're left with.
When did they take that covenant
When
requirement
when
out?
was that done?
2023 or 2024?
I don't, I'm
It
sorry,
was-
I don't recall that ever being taken out.
What's
Any-
a code
Does-
section?
Can I ask a
What's a
question
code
to all
section?
my board members? Do any of my board members recall that being taken out at all? Any presentation made to us or anything? So out of everybody here, none of us recall that or are familiar with that happening.
Well, actually, not all the board members, that was happening in 2022?
23, he said, but presentations have come before us listing all of them since then.
Well,
For any
I
lot
don't think
splits.
we've had a presentation that I recall where
Majority.
they
that he just gave the
eliminated-
example. Had it in there still.
And the covenant was very
And the
important.
covenant was one of
well,
the
we
items.
recently had that lot split that came before you.
Maggiore.
Majority.
The covenant was not part of the presentation.
Yes, it was.
It
Yes,
was?
That was what Hartnett,
That was a big deal.
James Hartnett, I think, was the neighbor.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
well,
Well, Robert
Ja-
Hartnett.
right,
he-
well,
he
James
specific-
Hartnett was arguing that, well, they did this covenant, but they took that requirement out.
When?
No,
When-
I remember reading that in there.
Yeah.
Jennifer, you're looking up the ordinance? She's so good. She's looking up the
Thanks.
ordinance.
I mean, for me, I've always been against, I've been against lot splits and in the city of Coral Gables. Specifically, when the requirement was whether the house was straddled between the properties or there was a pool that was between the properties or there was a
Septic
wall
tank,
or a
whatever.
fence or something. Or anything that was straddled. The other thing to me was, a covenant to me meant a covenant, to run with the land. I'm not in agreement with covenants being undone, because what's a covenant for? Then just do something and say in the future we can just remove it, or in the future we can modify it. I'm not talking for the board, but for me, I see that as an issue going forward with properties within the city. You're going to have a lot of, what I see happening with this is you're going to have a lot of people coming with lot splits, which we never had before.
I think the rationale, as I recall, was that the covenant can be released by the city commission. It's always been that case.
No,
So,
agreed.
so
Agreed.
the point was, if the city commission were allowing the lot split, in essence, they were, in effect, releasing the covenant, and that's why they took that requirement out, since they felt it was duplicative. I'm not saying that, I'm not commenting on whether it was a good idea or not a good idea, I'm just explaining what was done.
A month ago.
It was adopted on August 24, 2022. That change happened.
Why was it an issue a month ago with Maggiore?
I'm sorry, what year?
Last month?
2022.
And the month before.
I didn't hear that.
I think the issue with the Majority one was that they would have to demolish, remember, the building for that one was covered both lots, so they would have to demolish it. The commission had it sent back here because he attempted to argue that in essence, that the structure had been so, deteriorated that essentially it was an involuntary demolition, not a voluntary demolition. You recall the other side brought all these pictures seeming to suggest it wasn't as bad as council was arguing. The issue was not the covenant. The issue was the demolition of the voluntary demolition of the building. Had this law been adopted, they would have been able to split the property because it would be, they were maintaining the frontages, they were keeping, I believe, the square footages the same, but they were going to be able to, pursuant to the code, voluntarily demolish the structure that was straddling the property line. So this essentially addresses that issue. Whether you all are free to recommend denial if you don't think this is a good idea. That's why it's come before this board.
To answer the chair's previous question.
By the way, before you continue, you should be on radio
Okay.
because your voice is very soothing, and I just think it's a good.
I'll take the
Sorry.
soothing component.
It's out of context, but
I hope
glad
that wasn't a
everybody's soothed.
reflection on my voice, but anyway, I won't take it that way.
sorry about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think where maybe a little bit of the confusion is, I'm looking through the code right now. So remember, we've got a standard of administrative approval, and then for all the other components that do not meet the 5 components of administrative approval, and that's within the code right here, it's subsection E. I don't know if anybody's got the code up.
14202.
14-202.6, subsection E is standards for approval.
I'm looking
And
at
that would go for the administrative component. But when we get into the conditional use component, and that's what we're talking about tonight, and that's actually, as another question came up, it looks like the director has just provided me with the information. Back in June of last year, of 2024, the Planning and Zoning Board did actually approve an ordinance to basically assist with the process for building site determinations by removing redundant regulatory language that was already comprehensively addressed elsewhere within the zoning code. So what we do have now within the conditional use component for building site determinations is that subsection F, and that's where we have 4 components within F, and what we're looking at tonight for the proposed text amendment is F4A, and then F4B, and then additionally, the very last one, the one that we actually are talking about bringing back, which was previously in the code back up until 2022, is for conditions of approval, and that's in subsection G, if that helps at all. Hopefully. I've actually got a copy of the code if you'd like to.
I understand. I'd like to hear everybody's, actually, do we have anybody on Zoom? for this?
No, they all went to bed.
No Zoom, no
Soothing voice.
No one on Zoom.
And platform? Phone?
No.
Okay, let's close it for public comment. Felix?
What about Chip?
I want to start with you.
So, can you disclose, or is it a secret of who brought this up on the commission?
From what I understand, Commissioner Castro is the one
Okay.
that,
So my question is, from what I am understanding, you can now take 250-foot by 100-foot platted lots that have a house straddled across it, demolish the house and build two houses.
what, that would be incorrect. So that's the joy of the conditional use component, is each item would have to come in front of the whole process, DRC, Board of Architects, Planning and Zoning, and then that determination would be made by, through the whole public hearing process.
My house was originally built in 1950, and it straddled two lots, two platted lots. And when I bought it in 1990, I applied for a permit, and the city attorney, Liz Hernandez at that time, had me execute a unity of title
Correct.
to make sure that forever, that would be one house. I could build a second story on it. I could build an auxiliary building on it. As long as I met all the zoning requirements, that was that. The lot next to me was an empty lot. It had some type of title issue, and they bought it. Person that built it was a speculator, and he put 2 pounds in a 1 pound bag. And the house has a rear setback of about 6 feet. They have a front setback which is greater than 25 feet, simply because they couldn't fit the septic tank anywhere else. The incompatibility of that house exists. The neighbors are wonderful, very nice people. It's been sold twice since the original developer sold it. And you look at it and it just doesn't look like it fits normally. The problem that I see is that we have right now 77 pages in the back of our zoning code that have to do with uniqueness of every single site, from things such as mundane as which way the facing is on a particular street, to many other things there. And many of them have to do with these nuances that go neighborhood to neighborhood. Unfortunately, what I see is that I see people that speculate coming in and altering the feel and the look, of the neighborhood, that particular block. I see it over and over. The neglect issue, in other words, not deferred maintenance, the neglect, when I remember the attorney that was representing his mom said that, this thing just a couple of years ago looked like it was being rented, and here are the pictures. They've done that everywhere over time. Look at Miami Beach, an iconic hotel that was absolutely abandoned, and then finally it had to be demolished because it was beyond repair. So I don't see a real advantage of this without going through a specific hardship and going through the process as it stands now. I don't understand what the great advantage is to the greater, for the greater good. That's where I'm having a difficult time with. For me, I just make it as difficult as possible for people to comply with this, to make sure that it doesn't actually bring in speculators to do more of it. And that's always my concern, that when you make a change to the code, you know, it has a reaction somewhere else. So I have a difficult time in justifying this particular change. And also, you know, I think the commission has the power to remove their own covenants. They do not have the power to remove agreements between two parties where the city is not part of it. Correct, Mr. Collins?
That would be correct.
So for me, where I'm having a problem is that I think the unities of title should be required to ensure that, as it was to me 35 years ago. And I think that we should keep the status quo to be able to preserve that. I understand what is trying to be done as far as limiting the square footage, so basically it's the same thing. But it's not the same thing when you finally develop what's there.
Thank you.
Staff, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Forgive me.
That was it.
Staff wholeheartedly agrees with the component of the unity of title and the declaration of restrictive covenants. We're not touching any of that. And once again, that's why any application that would come in under this conditional use component would be looked at specifically during that conditional use component. Now, I've relatively recent employee here. I've only been here about 3 months now. And I will admit, we do get a relatively good amount of phone calls for building site determinations. The majority of them, we tell them, unfortunately, it's just not even a possibility. But that being said, the analysis that we did, and you mentioned the site specifics and so forth, only 241 properties within the city could potentially be affected by these proposed text amendments. And they're predominantly for those that are over that 20,000 square feet. Like I said previously, no matter what, each one of these applications would have to come in and be looked at individually, not only in front of staff, the DRC Board of Architects, but it would also come in front of the Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission. And really, I mean, not only are we making it more restrictive with the street frontage component and also bringing back the component for the restrictiveness of the residence, where it could not be any bigger than the original lot. But we're just slightly creating a little bit of flexibility for larger lots.
So at no point is this administrative anymore?
No.
It will always go before this
Yes.
board, and it'll always be properly advertised to the
Correct.
public within the 1,000-foot radius, et cetera.
Yes, yes, sir.
Chip?
Well, I remember years ago, there were probably 9 or 10 conditions to lot splitting. I think one of them was you had to own the property before 1971 or something like that, long, long time ago. I agree with you. I would like to make it as strict as we possibly can. You know, I would encourage the commission, if they do remove a covenant, that it's a unanimous vote, or at least a 4/5, as opposed to a majority. And I know folks that have been pretty upset with the city because they were required to put a unity of title on their property when they were doing construction on their home. So anything we can do to make it stronger and more difficult, I'm 100%.
Sue?
Well, if this benefits residents, does this benefit residents or does it benefit speculators?
It could definitely benefit somebody that owns that property, yeah, yeah.
By them getting more dollars.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's all about money.
yeah, it's a whole lot more money.
Yep.
With that said, I think I'm with the chair as far as lot splitting. I don't think we should split lots.
I don't either. Julio?
pass.
Mr. Javier?
One question for staff.
Yes, sir.
The project that we denied the other day, would
Yes.
this have any effect on that? These changes, would that?
Well, staff made a recommendation for
I
not
didn't ask
approving
that
it.
question. I'm saying what impact would it had on this project?
Can they utilize it?
The only component that it could utilize is the 20,000 square foot.
The answer is yes.
They're over
The answer is
20,000
yes,
square
then.
feet. Yeah.
You don't want to say
Yeah.
yes, but it's yes.
But,
Okay.
well, but there's also the frontage component, which would be added in addition to
Yeah,
what
but they
that.
met frontage component.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so. It does have over 20,000 square feet.
Yes, it does.
Robert?
Thank you.
Any comments, Robert?
No, this is a lot split.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
It's a lot split.
It's a lot split.
Yeah, I agree.
And to me, I've already made my comments, so I don't need to make any further comments. Is, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny.
I'll second it.
We have a motion to deny. We have a second by Javier. Any further discussion?
No?
Call the roll, please.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Sama,
Yes to deny.
Chip Weiser,
Yes.
Julio Claudia. Sue Kavalaski,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes to deny. Thank you very much. Is there? that
motion to
concludes
adjourn?
Tonight, is there a motion to adjourn? We have it by Robert, second by Javier. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, my butt.
Recording stopped.